It has to be that we begin to shut down the fossil industry. We build bridges for people to find new jobs so they don't have to suffer in that process. And we build up other sorts of energy. And we have to pay more for that. I mean, that's one of the other issues which people, I think, don't understand. We have all the technology we need. It's just that we're not willing to pay more for it today.
It's an interesting point you make. So, I mean, if we think about it in theory, I mean, really, in terms of job security the world over, we could really transition the people working in the fossil industry to renewable energy by perhaps even training them today, now.
No, I mean, one of the things that the Club of Rome is very keen on advocating is reducing the rate of inequality. And it's not just from a moral point of view. It's not just because we think that's the right thing to do. It's because if people have a good welfare net, if when they lose their jobs in the coal, oil and gas sector, they can still feed their families and they can still hold their heads up, that makes it easier to make the transition. They can go and retrain and they don't have.
Setting rules for blockchain for the very first time. Swiss regulator FINMA has published guidelines for organizers of initial coin offerings, or ICOs. Now, this is good news for blockchain technology and its long-term sustainability and success, but is FINMA doing enough to quash worries and the potential risks to investors? In our big picture, we're taking you to where people go on vacation. Tomorrow, Switzerland Tourism will present its yearly results and trends, and we can already reveal that the National Marketing and Sales Organization expects a growth of between 4 to 5% for the current winter season compared to the last. Now, that's based on the season so far. So does this mean the tough times for tourism are over? Well, Yong Chen, assistant professor at Ecole hôtelière in Lausanne, tells us if snow-enthusiastic Chinese tourists could brighten up the outlook.
We know Switzerland is very famous for skiing and many other activities. So therefore, when Chinese travelers come to a particular destination, they just want to experience something which is specific to that country. So I think Switzerland might be one of the top destinations in the future for Chinese sports travelers, especially snow sports activities.
Coming up in our Newsmaker Hour, he calls himself Russian President Putin's #1 enemy because of the Magnitsky Act that he pushed through the U.S. Congress in the name of his late Russian lawyer. His pursuit of oligarchs involves an investigation into alleged money laundering in Switzerland, which has gone on for years. But now, in an interview with us, Bill Browder claims that the Swiss investigation was corrupted, and he's pointing a finger in the direction of Russia.
This was the Swiss authorities who discovered this collusion. Now we want to get it fully fleshed out and figure out how it can be properly dealt with going forward so that the Russians, that Putin isn't able to shush up a major investigation into his money laundering in Switzerland.
Good evening. You're watching The Swiss Pulse. I am Ana Maria Montero, and welcome to the Living Markets. We've got a packed show for you tonight, so let's get started. Let's begin with those news making headlines here in Switzerland and around the world. Mining group and commodity trader Glencore is showing renewed strength, announcing its strongest ever full-year performance on Wednesday. Rising commodity prices have helped drive the company's comeback over the past 12 months, with gains in copper, coal, and cobalt. Speaking after the release of the company's annual results, Glencore CEO Ivan Glasenberg said booming cash flows mean shareholders will be paid $2.9 billion in dividends. 120,000 German car workers just won a 4.3% pay raise and more time off. Volkswagen's new pay deal includes the option of 6 additional days of annual leave for some groups of workers. The news comes days after the German automaker reported its best January sales record within a jump of 10%. Meanwhile, the sterling fell against the dollar on Wednesday as the UK unemployment ticked up from 4.3% to 4.4%, the sharpest increase in nearly 5 years. However, in brighter news coming out of the UK Office for National Statistics on Wednesday, average earnings beat forecasts, increasing by 2.5% compared to an expectation of 2.4% growth. Now, although the Bank of England expects real wage growth in 2018, the ONS pointed out that people are still not seeing wages rise quick enough to keep up with prices in the UK. Well, Switzerland was up a medal today in the Pyeongchang Games, with Mark Bischofberger taking second place in the men's ski cross competition behind Canadian Brady Lemon. The ski cross competition has 4 racers speeding side by side on a curvy course at speeds of up to 90 kilometers an hour. Bischofberger's silver medal win brings Switzerland's medal count to 8. And don't forget to watch us live on YouTube or catch up with our not-to-be-missed content online. We will take a short break now for your travel weather update, but stay with us for that market summary. It's up next.
CNN Money Switzerland business weather, starting with Europe. Next step, Africa and the Middle East. Southeast Asia. And now Australia and Oceania. Let's go to North America. We end our trip with South America. CNN Money Switzerland accompanies you all over the world.
CNN Money Switzerland brings you the content you need, whenever, wherever you need it. On our website, cnnmoney.ch, or on your favorite social media platform. Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
News programs are usually full of short stories that hardly go beneath the surface. We give you the big picture. Every weekday evening at 7 p.m, the big picture goes deeper, looking at an issue from different angles and bringing you the guests who take time to speak, explain, and elaborate. Our viewers get a deeper understanding of the day's issues and the context that underlies them. The Big Picture, weekdays from 7 to 8 p.m.
How do you make sure you're feeling good? We'll be focusing on all the tools available to us today to make sure we're physically and mentally healthy. From monitoring and avoiding disease to reactive and preventative health care. In particular, we'll be delving into the latest innovation coming out of Switzerland to ensure a long and healthy life.
Feeling Good with Amanda Kane on CNN Money Switzerland.
The Newsmaker is the ultimate talk show, where the biggest names in Switzerland tell you their most important stories. We delve into the economy, markets, politics, real estate, media, technology, and more to sharpen your mind and broaden your horizon. Every weekday from 8 to 9 p.m. Entertainment, culture, fashion, arts, and lifestyle. We've got it covered on Spotlight.
Spotlight with Ana Maria Montero on CNN Money Switzerland.
I've spent all of my career in the field, and I think that informs who I want to talk to, but more importantly, who wants to and who accepts to talk to me. And I hope that what I bring to the table is a rigorous search for the truth and a rigorous determination and an effort to hold power accountable.
Amanpour. CNN Money Switzerland is designed to flow through information. Our network provides a unique take on live, worldwide financial news. We are not your common news outlet. Instead, we act as a global catalyst of interconnected information. Our live studio provides you with a detailed and sharp analysis, predicting what is yet to come. From the heart of Europe, watch CNN Money Switzerland.
Welcome back to the Swiss Pulse. Now it's time for some market news. Now, in fact, it was a bit of a quiet day today all around. Asian stock markets, they closed in the green. US also closed up. In Europe, only the German DAX finished off a little bit in the red. And actually, the SMI here in Switzerland stayed red all day long, basically. But shortly before closing time, it jumped suddenly into the green by just a hair. Now, moving on to profits of an Anglo-Swiss company, Glencore, they reached an all-time high for 2017. The company benefited from its combination of trading and mining, as well as higher commodity profits. So we can see adjusted profits up, net profit up, dividends up. A good year, 2017, for Glencore, which in turn had the share prices reacting positively and making their biggest jump since last August by more than 4.5%. Meanwhile, Fidessa, one of the so-called grandfathers of the UK financial technology market, has agreed to a takeover by Swiss software group Temenos. Now, this announcement comes just one day after the two sides said they were in advanced talks, but Temenos investors reacted cautiously, as you can see, to that announcement, with shares moving into the red territory, down 1.39%. All right, now let's come to cryptocurrencies. After crossing the $11,000 mark 2 days ago, Bitcoin's price reversed trajectory this morning. At 5 p.m. this afternoon, the price of a single Bitcoin was trading at $10,565.39, down almost 6%. And actually, now we are going to continue our discussion of cryptocurrency, because for those watching out, new cryptocurrencies seem to be coming to the market almost every day through what is called an initial coin offering, or ICO. Now, here's CNN tech correspondent Remy Sabar on all you need to know about ICOs.
What do Ghostface Killah, Paris Hilton, and Floyd Mayweather have in common? They're all trying to cash in on a new trend: ICOs. You've probably heard of an IPO before. An ICO is a little bit different. During an IPO, investors buy stock, which translates into ownership shares of that company. But in an ICO, an initial coin offering, they buy cryptocurrency tokens, like Bitcoin, but ones made by and for a specific company. Deciding which cryptocurrency to invest in, if any, can be a little bit confusing. There are more than 1,000 cryptocurrencies in circulation right now, with more being introduced almost every day. Elliot Hahn, the managing director of the crypto-focused investment bank, the Argonne Group, says you can think of these digital tokens like the tokens you'd use to play an arcade game. During an ICO, there are two kinds of tokens you can buy. The first is a utility token. It's meant to be used on goods and services offered by the company that developed that cryptocurrency. This is just like when you go to an arcade and exchange money for gameplay tokens. They're meant to be used in the machines at that particular location and nowhere else. The second type of token is called a security token. That doesn't mean that they're safer. The security refers to financial securities. You're buying into the company like you would in an IPO, but you don't get the equity that comes with regular stock. So why would you buy in? The expectation is that those tokens will eventually be worth something once that company develops a way for people to spend them. If demand goes up, Early investors can sell their tokens for a profit. But until that happens, you're taking a bit of a gamble. It would be like if your friend had plans to open a new arcade and he convinced you to buy tokens up front. He says there will only be a limited number in circulation, and you trust that eventually those tokens will be worth something once the arcade opens. But right now, it's mostly wishful thinking. Also, until governments set up clear guidelines for how cryptocurrencies should be used, investing in them can be extremely risky. And as we've seen with Bitcoin, the market can be volatile. Singapore has published an ICO best practices guide, and China has temporarily banned them. The SEC has created a cyber unit to investigate misconduct, but ICOs still aren't as clearly regulated as IPOs in the US and most other countries, making it even easier for scammers to take advantage. But whether cryptocurrency is actually the future of money or just a passing fad, you'll be hearing a lot more about ICOs in the coming months, while investors try to cash in and lawmakers try and regulate them.
Now, Switzerland is playing a major role globally in hosting these. I mean, out of the world's 6 largest ICOs, 4 took place in Switzerland. Now, basically, there are 3 types of ICOs. We've got payment, utility, and asset. So here we are. There are 3. So in other words, we have 3 ways for companies to raise capital. We've got the payment tokens, synonymous with cryptocurrencies, utility, which is they offer digital access to up to an application or service, and the asset tokens, where they are analogous to equities, bonds, or derivatives. Now, last Friday, FINMA, the Swiss financial market regulator, released guidelines as concerns mount over risks of money laundering and other abuses by investors. Here it is. Now, ICOs will now have to comply with certain rules. Basically, we're going to break it down in these 3 parts. Payment of ICOs, they comply with anti-money laundering regulations. Utility ICOs, they have to comply with securities regulations. And asset ICOs, they comply with securities regulations and civil laws. Now, we are joined at our desk, at our big desk here, by our guest, Olga Feldmeier. She is CEO of SmartValor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting.
Now, it seems like a very volatile but also exciting time to be in cryptocurrencies. Here on the Living Markets, we've been following the ICO trail, so to speak, which today leads us to you, of course, CEO of SmartValor. In a simple way, would you say that your company helps startups use tokens to access capitals, or ICOs to access capital?
Well, I would say you see SmartValor, we build in SmartValor as a marketplace, decentralized marketplace for tokenized alternative investments. Actually, it's a much bigger boat.
I say like this because maybe, well, we'll just back it up a second. So tokenized investments, walk us through that.
Tokenized alternative investments, right? So alternative investments is basically everything that is not equity, cash, or bond, right? So it's a huge space. It's all the private equity, venture capital, you know, real estate, private investments, and so on. But also crypto investments. This is a new area of alternative investments, right? Yes. So for us, ICO is just one of the topics. You can actually tokenize anything, right?
This is very interesting to me because I think I've even heard you say that you could tokenize what you're wearing.
It's a coat.
Is your coat.
Well, maybe that's not the best example, but actually, you know, the tokenization allows us a more efficient way to deal with ownership and transfer of value, of any value, right? Okay. And it actually, if properly, if this technology is used in a proper way, you can create assets, you know, in a much more liquid and accessible way, right? You can, for example, there were examples of tokenization of venture capital fund, right? Okay. The token is representing share in the venture capital fund. So what you create there is something similar to securitization, whereas the token, the difference is, of course, the token is, you know, it lives on the blockchain, it's governed by the smart contract. You can exchange the value in the form of token in a much easier way, right? You can sell and buy it, you can trade it, and it becomes much more liquid investment.
So is venture capital a sector that really benefits from tokenization, is what you're saying?
Not yet, but it's
coming. Not yet, but it's coming.
Yes.
So who benefits the most from tokenization at the moment?
I think overall the society, because you see with Bitcoin, we saw basically something I would put as democratization of money, that anybody can have access to post-national currency not you know, not governed by any country. So that was the first stage. Now we enter in the next stage of, you know, application of this technology, and that's going to be democratization of access to wealth, right? Okay. Where anybody can not just, you know, buy Bitcoin and transfer money, but also where anybody has an access to investment alternatives that were previously, that are today, the privilege of the rich. Alternative investment space, private equity, all those investments, by making them tokenized, smaller, more accessible and liquid, this is the democratization of wealth.
And how easy is it to have an ICO, to put together an ICO?
ICO is actually, used to be very simple. The first ICO, well, where the story started, it was Ethereum back in 2014, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, you know, this Ethereum is a tool and a platform to write relatively simply smart contracts and issue a token, right? Okay. So basically, you would just need to write several lines of code and smart contract, and then you can say, well, guys, this is our token. You just, you know, wire your Bitcoins, your any cryptocurrency to this, or Ether to this, you know, public key to this address, right? And this is it. It started like this, but today, you know, because there is such a growing competition for attention and for these resources in the field, right? We had last year 1,000 ICOs, right?
Yes, 1,000,
yeah,
right.
5.6 billion raised, right? In comparison to venture capital, which put around 1 million in the space, right?
And it's only been 4 years, right? More or less since the initial Ethereum,
well, yeah,
2014.
Exactly.
No? So,
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000.
So because it was so actually so easy, you know, more and more companies and startups are, of course, using this opportunity, right? So the space is becoming very crowded, and the consequence of it is that, you know, that there is a certain competition in terms of marketing and how people promote it, and that pulls a lot of resources into this field.
Right, and brings up the topic of what do you do when there are so many players in the market? How do you regulate them? And we are going to talk about that later on a little bit with you. But just to give us an idea, how big a player is Switzerland in the crypto world at the moment?
Well, you know, I could give you... We hear that it's
a big player, right?
I could give you several facts. You know, from those 5.6 billion last year, approximately 1 billion was raised through the companies that are at least domiciled here. Now, there is a big difference of, you know, company domiciled and where the management and the team really is, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, if you look at numbers, you know, how many companies were issuing ICO in US and how many are really there, those are approximately the same numbers, right? Here in Switzerland, it's a little bit different. You know, a lot of have been raised through Swiss companies, but not so many companies are here. And this is what we need to change. We need to bring all those exciting projects and companies here to Switzerland.
All right, well, look forward to hearing more about that. And like we said, regulation after the break. Thank you so much. So you will be back again after the break to talk to us more about how FINMA is tightening the rules on ICOs and much more. So don't go away.
Since the founding of the Red Cross in 1863, the city of Geneva has a long tradition of hosting international organizations. In our program, International Geneva, we'll be exploring issues of international cooperation, humanitarian assistance and human rights, and talk to international players about the challenges and solutions to global problems.
International Geneva with Martina Fuchs on CNN Money Switzerland.
CNN Money Switzerland brings you the content you need, whenever, wherever you need it. Get the latest Swiss business and financial information on TV, on our website, cnnmoney.ch, or on your favorite social media platform. The best Swiss business news whenever and wherever you need it. Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
How do you turn your idea into a successful business in Switzerland? If you want to develop your business,
tech, and how do companies react to the ever-changing challenges of the markets? We've got our finger on the Swiss pulse. We'll bring you the ups and downs, bulls and bears of the world of business, always asking, what it means for you. The Swiss Pulse, weekdays from 6 to 9 p.m.
Business is always changing. Keep up with CNN Money. Maggie Lake is live in the heart of the world's economic epicenter, New York City, tracking all the action of the stock exchanges and the big business stories from around the world. Get top analysis of market movement and a daily breakdown of financial headlines. CNN Money with Maggie Lake.
At the end of the business day, we're only just getting started. On the living markets from 6 to 7 p.m., we crunch the numbers on the financial markets, bring you the top analysis of the day, and set the agenda for tomorrow. Always with Switzerland important global links in mind. The living markets, weeknights from 6 to 7 p.m., only on CNN Money Switzerland. Welcome back to the Swiss Pulse. You're watching the living markets. And just before the break, we introduced our guest who joins me now at the desk, Olga Feldmeier. She is CEO of SmartValor. And we were breaking down this whole cryptocurrency ICO world that is taking over the finance news recently with so much volatility and so much news. And part of the thing, of the bit that's changed now for the ICOs, which is very important, is that FINMA has finally introduced some kind of regulation. I mean, do you agree that up to this point it had become a little bit like the Wild West?
Yes, this is, of course, the perception of people outside, that we're a huge bubble and it's all Wild West. If you're inside of that business,
it's much more organized. Or
things looks pretty much different. Okay. But anyway, it's not really regulation. I think it's more like guidelines, and the purpose of it is to provide at least some guidance for startups and for companies in this space, right? And a lot of people expected more from this guideline. I think it's very good. It gives a shape and basic guiding principles, right? It doesn't, give too much detail, but it just hints on certain things. And this is great. This is what we need. Principle-based regulation. This is a strong side of Swiss regulation, and this is great.
What is so great about it? I mean, what principle-based regulation?
That you leave a space, right? You don't go there and provide 100 rules for all the cases in advance. If this, then it should be like this. Because you see, the space is so new, right? We never had this before. How could you go over and write a very detailed prescription and regulation? That would kill the innovation in this space, right? And this is exactly the reason why we here in Switzerland, with FINMA as a regulator, have a very good chance to develop into global crypto hub. Because we have this principle-based approach, it enables breathing space, it enables innovation. And, we will see where this goes.
Part of the reason for this kind of guideline being imposed is, of course, to protect investors from money laundering and to keep things as transparent as possible. Do you think it's going to be effective enough?
Well, you see, I think this guideline is now not deciding anything. Everything that is there was actually there anyway. Now it's just on paper, right? It means, that FINMA is looking at those cases case-by-case basis, right? Because they're all very different, right? So this stays the same. It's great that they said, okay, there are those 3 types of tokens. And even, some people say, oh, well, this is obvious. No, but this is great because up to date, no other country did this, like even classifying like that, right? So this is great. And yeah, they're saying, well, with payment token, of course, you need to apply anti-money laundering rules and so on. And with utility tokens, there are other definitions. So this is nothing new, right? What is great also, that they kind of also hint on that how they apply this regulation and how they will deal with those cases. This is more forward-looking. So that means, those ICOs that have been done in 2017, a lot of people are afraid, that now they will start to dig into those ICOs and start to So this is not the focus. The focus is the future. And actually, I think the most important part was not what is in the guidelines, but what is in announcement about the guidelines. And in the announcement, there is a quote from Mark Branson, who is the head of FINMA. And he's saying something like, with our balanced approach, we enable innovative projects to run fundraising in a compliant way, right? And this statement, this is actually the biggest and the most important statements, because it shows the way FINMA is going. It shows the way they want to enable innovation and good companies coming here.
In other words, they don't want regulation to block. They don't want to use that, or guidelines, or to be a block. They want to be able to facilitate more. And why do you think other countries have been reluctant to have their own guidelines, to establish their own guidelines?
Well, reluctant is a good word. If you look at China and what they did in September.
Oh, yes, that would be the other extreme.
Right, they completely prohibited the whole thing, right? In US, it's also kind of difficult. You know, there is a very strict regulation around what is security. And if you look at the tokens today, and you will apply the rules how US is defining securities, almost everything is security, and it has very heavy legal consequences, right? And if you look at what US were doing in they issued warning to investors, right? And this Security and Exchange Commission, right? And to be honest, this is of limited help, because what we actually need is more guidance. How do we deal with this new form of crowdfunding, and not warning investors about it? You know, this is. So I think, you know, Switzerland and Singapore and smaller countries, they have a competitive advantage in this because they are more flexible and they're more independent, right? They don't have a huge Security and Exchange Commission and a million of people that need to decide. And, you know, the less bureaucracy you have.
They're keeping it simple.
Exactly.
Right. Now, you also have a little bit of background in banking. Do you feel like, you know, traditional IPOs are subjected to heavy regulation and to strict regulation, I guess I would say.
Exactly.
Is it fair that the ICOs are just being given guidelines?
I think it's fair and it's needed, right? Because this is completely different, new field. How this is different? IPOs is basically for quite a big companies, right? That are, you know, multi-billion companies, and after initial private funding, right, in growth stage, now they go to public markets. With startups, it's a little bit different. It's actually, you know, a different form of crowdfunding, right?
Okay.
We had this for the last 5 years, this form of, you know, crowd-funded equity, right? So in the legal, in technical terms, we already had this. Now it's just a different form. Now we issue a token, and you can buy this token for cryptocurrency. This is what's different, right? But it's about the same. It's about people crowdfunding startups, you know? And I think, of course, the regulation needs to be completely different from those that you apply to big companies going public.
In the end, I think everybody wants to avoid situations like the pesos, you know, repeating itself. So will these guidelines keep that from happening is the big question, I think. Yeah, well, probably not the guidelines, but I think the approach that FINMA is driving, right? Looking very carefully at different projects and, you know, enabling and supporting serious projects, right, with big innovation potential. And this is important for Switzerland. Switzerland is a leader in innovation in all the different rankings, right? And it was always a problem, like, how do we attract those startups to Switzerland, right? How do we don't have enough venture capital. That was always a problem. So this is happening now. The companies are coming. Because of the ICOs, you think? Yes. And you keep talking about innovation. Just to clarify, what is it you're referring to? Innovation, well, this is... You're talking just technology or innovation on every level? Or you see, when we talk about blockchain, innovations there, you can't limit it to one industry, right? Of course, in banking and financial services, this is the biggest area that's going to be disrupted by this technology, but it has application in all other areas, right? So innovation, blockchain is
just one of the technologies, you know, that is
okay, this is
innovative.
Yes. Okay, this is what you're referring to. So just to finish up, would you say that Switzerland has a comparable advantage to other countries?
Definitely.
In terms of cryptocurrency
in terms
ICOs?
Of, I think, you know, Switzerland is on the good way. If we just keep doing what we were doing now, right? I was involved in the first Bitcoin regulatory case, and that was a big success, right? And now with ICO, this is a very good development, right? This neutral, balanced approach, this is great. If we just keep doing that, Switzerland has a real chance to become one of the top 3 global crypto hubs of the world, right? And I'm very excited about it.
Who's in the top space?
Well, I think Singapore is in London.
Singapore is number 1.
London.
And then London,
probably.
And then we could be number 3. All right.
I would say we can be number 1.
We'll see how that works out. Thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us today, Olga. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
All right, now, if you've been watching our coverage of the Winter Olympics, you will recognize this beauty. Oh, that's right. It is our cowbell. And when a Swiss athlete has won a medal, we ring it. So, up now is sport with Matt Layton, and I'm happy to say there was plenty of bell ringing when we chatted earlier. Yes! There it is, Matt. Ring that bell again.
Yes. We have to make an announcement. From now on, silver is the new gold, because we're fed up of not being able to ring our bell. Silver because this morning, 27-year-old Mark Bischofberger from Switzerland took the silver medal in the ski cross. So he's a pretty much full-time athlete this time of year, because his employer's given him a few months off. Really, really difficult competition, but he's done extremely well. So he's actually the main man today, but we're celebrating another medal. That's 8 medals so far. Last time they had 11 medals. Still time to do things, but we're going to have to see how that pans out in the next couple of days.
Now, ski cross, this is not the safest sport, from what I understand.
The challenge is, and we've looked at statistics from 2010, 2014 Olympic Games, and we even saw in the ski cross today, poor Canadians had a bit of a bad injury. We're looking at the statistics of how many injuries athletes competing in these games have, and the statistics are absolutely frightening. The formula is, if you go fast and you go high and you turn upside down, there's a big probability of hurting yourself. Snowboard slopestyle, over 35% of athletes hurt themselves. Snowboard cross, freestyle aerials, ski slopestyle, and ski halfpipe, all over 30% possibility of hurting yourself. You then come down to bobsleigh and alpine skiing, about 20%, about 10% risk if you're curling. You might get tendinitis, you might get a bad back or something else. And then the lowest one, which is really a surprise to me, is the combined Nordic, which is where you go off the ski jump, but apparently most people tend to land it. So it's good for us sitting in our armchairs watching it, but quite frankly, having over 30% chance of hurting yourself is a bit too high for most of us.
Yes, it's definitely something I would think twice about, for sure. And speaking of medals, there is still hope for some more medals to reach that 11 overnight. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you the downhill this morning was very disappointed, and Switzerland didn't do anything. So let's not go on about that.
Okay. We'll just keep moving. Go ahead.
Super combined tomorrow. Wendy Holden as the world champion. Michelle Gizin, she's the vice world champion. Both did that a year ago now in St. Moritz. They're both going to be competing tomorrow, so that's very, very exciting. Lindsay Vonn and all the big names, unfortunately, are also going to be competing. Sofia Goggia, who won the gold medal this morning in the downhill, she's going to be there. But it is a huge possibility for Switzerland to take a 9th medal. And we don't forget about curling. Yesterday it was all doom and gloom, and Switzerland had to have a certain combination of results go in their favour. Well, potentially they have. Tomorrow, they have to play Great Britain in a shootout. The last time they played Great Britain was in the first round of this competition. They lost very, very closely. They beat them 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now, if they beat them tomorrow, then they go into semi-finals. So that's pretty good news. Apart from that, searching around, we don't have that much news to relay of a positive nature. The cross-country skiers didn't do much today. And everyone else is really giving it their all, but not quite getting on the medal table. So it's fingers crossed tomorrow for Gizin and Holdener.
That's right, fingers crossed. And on my end, I'm always happy to ring that bell. So I hope I get another opportunity tomorrow to do that. Thank you so much, Matt Layton, for that update.
Thank you. Thank you.
We switch gears now and head to Lausanne, where the Musée des Lycées is currently presenting The Beauty of Lines. This exhibit consists of a collection of masterpieces from the history of photography belonging to collectors Sondra Gilman and her husband, Celso González Falla. Theirs is considered to be one of the best private collections of photography in the world, consisting of over 1,500 original prints by some of the greatest photographers of the 20th and 21st centuries. Now, for the first time, over 1,000 prints can be seen together in a European museum. And I had the opportunity to chat with Sondra Gilman, who confirmed this was, in fact, a first for the couple. So this is the first time that this large a piece of your collection comes to Europe.
Yes.
Why did you choose Lausanne?
I didn't.
They chose you?
No. Well,
how did that happen?
They chose me first.
Okay.
But then I met Tatiana Frank, who is the head of the director of the museum. And when you meet Tatiana, you can't resist her. Well, what she did was, we've been forming the collection over years, and we thought we knew all aspects of it. It's toured, it's traveled, She came in, and she looked at it, and she said, "I see lines." And we said, "Lines?" She said, "Yes, up and down, across, and then circles." We had never seen anything like that in the photographs, but the moment she pointed it out, there it was. And so her idea for the theme is unique. Nothing has ever been approached like that. And it's seeing our babies with brand new eyes, in a new dress.
So the Beauty of Lines also includes some photographs by our Swiss Robert Frank.
Robert Frank was probably one of the most important photographers of this age. Photography was not the same after that. He was a total, because he didn't glorify it. He took ordinary life, ordinary people doing ordinary things, not the subject for photography, where you were all dressed up or it was something special. This was America, middle America as it existed, going on with its life. Photography was never the same.
And so your husband and you share this passion for photography?
Yes.
You always shared this, or did you introduce him?
When I had been collecting, and then when I married him, he loved taking photographs. In other words, he was an amateur photographer. So it was a very easy trip between having him love to take pictures and looking at photographs. And he converted very easily.
And how did you go about finding your photographs? Did you do it through other collectors or I don't know, street markets, or I don't know, how do you collect them?
It's much easier today. When I first started, there were practically no galleries. In the 70s, it didn't exist as an art form. So you had to find photographers, that through word of mouth. It was much harder. There were 2 galleries that were superb, and they handled great. Some of the greatest works I got through them. But then photography became accepted. Galleries popped up all over. I don't like to buy from an artist, and I don't like to get to know an artist too well, because I'm very emotional. And if I met an artist and liked him, I would be, first of all, I don't think I could judge his work impartially. Secondly, I'd die if I looked at it and thought he was bad. Or conversely, if I hated somebody and looked at his work and thought he was marvelous. So I mostly buy from galleries where the artists, we're friendly with a few artists, you know, that we've been collecting for years, but I try to avoid any personal relationship.
And would you say there's a good balance between black and white and color, or is it a mix? And for you, it's the same?
Whatever.
You're happy with whatever she's putting together?
Well, as I said, whenever we bought it, whenever my husband gets very upset when I say when my stomach flipped, because he said, you're an art major, you can say you bought it because of this or that. I said, I can say it. I really buy it because my stomach flips.
And when did this love affair with photography begin for you?
I was a young girl, and I was part of something called the Junior Council at the Museum of Modern Art. And I had never seen a photograph that my father hadn't taken. And I didn't even know anybody else took photographs. I was a painting and sculpture major, art major. And the only museum in the world that dealt with photography as an art was the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And they had a photographic show by a photographer called Atget, who was French in the beginning, 1910. And I was trotting around on some kind of an errand, and I marched in. And I was never the same. Never the same. I had an epiphany. I marched out. I went to the curator's office, who happened to be the greatest photography curator almost in America at that point. I was very lucky. And I sat down and I said, John, tell me about photography. And he spent 3 days giving me a crash course in photography. And at the end, he said, Sondra, we're selling, where we have duplicate images, he said, we're selling the duplicates to raise money for $250 each. I picked 3 Atgets, and I bought them. And I came home, my entire family said, you belong in the insane asylum. You should be in a jacket. They're going to take you away. You bought 3 photographs? And I remember saying, I just bought Rembrandt. I just bought Rembrandt. And I did.
Now what are they worth?
Oh, I don't know. We've never sold a photograph, ever.
Ever?
Ever.
Okay.
We buy them, we're keeping the collection, and we'll form a foundation and do it for the public.
Like your own museum, possibly, or?
It won't be a museum, but it will be something that is a photography center.
I have to ask, did you then start photographing yourself?
How could my husband photographs? I would no more photograph and look at one of mine compared to what was on the wall. I couldn't do it. He just charges along, taking picture after picture. But I would be so upset with what it looked like compared to what I collected that I've never even picked up a camera.
That is so funny, because now we all have cameras on our phones,
exactly.
Right? I mean, it's so easy.
I never use it. Never use it.
And in terms of the valuation of fine art photography, is it comparable to, again, contemporary art, or?
It still doesn't make the money that, say, a Van Gogh would get.
Few things make that money, right?
Or Da Vinci, right?
Or Da Vinci, for that matter.
Da Vinci.
Hundreds of millions.
Da Vinci. So it's much under that, but it's still gone up tremendously, tremendously. And the artists now that are well-known, and the photographs, the images that are well-known, will get quite high prices. But the artists starting out now will be definitely affordable. And I encourage everybody to start, because you can really get some wonderful, wonderful things, affordable prices.
And right now, I assume the market also is just expanding enormously because so many people have access to cameras.
Yes, It is. It's a different world. We find it hard to believe, but we're thrilled. We're just thrilled.
Is there anybody out there, a contemporary photographer that you're following or have your eye on a little bit that you're like, this one we've got to watch?
A few. A few. Also, I'm head of the acquisition committee for the Whitney Museum. So 3 times a year we meet and we buy photographs for the collection. So that's something else that I do. But you need a different eye for that. Okay. When I buy something for myself, it's, do I love it?
It's the stomach flipping thing, yeah.
Does my stomach, can I live without it? But for the Whitney, it's a public institution. And you buy to make sure that whatever is happening is represented. You buy because you want the art currents to be represented. You want the social situations to be represented. So it's a totally, and it's not what you would want to live with. A lot of the things we buy and go, I wouldn't want to look at it. I mean, it would give me nightmares. But it's a different philosophy, different mindset.
And what are the factors that you consider when you put a price tag on a photograph? I know that sounds a bit, put a price tag, makes it seem a little bit, what do you consider?
It's arbitrary. It's all market directed. It has nothing to do with the quality of the photographs. Does it? There are certain, and if a photographer has a gallery, the gallery spends a lot of time and money promoting the artist. If the art, so you read about it and it has exhibitions, and so it becomes, per se, more valuable. If an artist died and doesn't have a gallery and nobody knows them, the prices aren't high. And then a gallery finds them and puts it up and doubles the prices. So it's market. Don't get me started on market. I'm really upset with it because it doesn't have a direct relationship to value at all. It's promotion.
And is this a growing trend, do you think, or is this something?
Oh, it's been there.
It's been there, but it...
Years and years.
Is there any way around it?
Yes, there's a very good way around it.
What?
You use your own head. You don't get affected.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You look, and you make up your own mind. You may not necessarily always be right, but it's the only true way to go. It's hype on everything. We live in a house in New York, and it's 5 stories, and so the photographs, a tremendous amount on the wall of the staircase. So we try to keep it up not any more than 6 or 7 months, and then we take everything down and change it.
And then you rotate them?
Yeah, we have to, for the health of the photographs.
So a message to people watching that are aspiring photography collectors, what would you tell them?
I would say go to as many galleries as you can, go to as many museums that are doing photography shows as you can. Don't make up your mind, I like this, I don't like this immediately. Look, look, look. The eye is a great teacher. It will teach you how to judge. And after a period of time, you'll learn to trust your eye. And at that point, research the artist, look at all the work that he's done so far, if you can, and if you still love it, buy it.
Eurostar's new high-speed service from London to Amsterdam is running behind schedule. 16 months to be exact. The service was originally scheduled to launch in December of 2016. After a series of delays, the first customers will finally board on April 4th. Eurostar inaugurated the route Tuesday, giving a sneak peek to a special group of riders, including CNN's Anna Stewart.
For 2 decades, their trains have barreled under the English Channel, revolutionising travel between the UK and Europe. Since launching in the 90s, Eurostar says it's doubled the number of visitors travelling from London to Paris and Brussels. Now its outgoing CEO hopes a new service from London to Amsterdam and Rotterdam will deliver on a long-awaited promise.
We have so many customers saying, when are you going to Amsterdam? So that's it, we're starting.
With prices starting at $50 each way, Eurostar is pitching itself as an alternative to low-cost airlines. like Ryanair and EasyJet. But it's going to take a lot longer. Flying takes around an hour and a half, whereas this will take 3 hours, 41 minutes. Of course, it goes straight to the city centre, though, and Eurostar says it'll save time and money on getting to the airport. Brexit has actually boosted Eurostar. It's not just the weak pound, but all the EU and UK officials shuttling between London and Brussels for talks.
And also London-Paris, because a lot of companies are thinking, oh, maybe we should establish a subsidiary or something, and let's do it now while we're part of the EU.
Crossing into the Netherlands wasn't easy for Eurostar. It required hundreds of millions of pounds in investment and years of negotiations with Dutch officials. It's taken much longer than planned, and some hurdles still remain.
The huge problem for Eurostar is that they are launching, effectively, a train that only goes in one direction.
The UK and the Netherlands have yet to come to an agreement on passport checks, and they're not expected to do so until the end of next year. So until then, you've got to get a separate train to Brussels, where you go through passport control, and then you can hop on the Eurostar back to London. So you can get from London to Amsterdam in time for lunch, but you'll be hard-pressed to make it back for dinner. Anna Stewart, CNN Money, Amsterdam.
All right, and back to Switzerland. I'm joined now in the studio by my colleague Martina Fuchs, who is ready to take the reins from the transition to the big picture.
Right,
Tell me, what can we do?
The big picture, Anna Maria, today is about Swiss winter tourism. I'm sure you're also a big fan of ski and snowboard.
Absolutely.
And actually, tomorrow, Switzerland Tourism is going to release its annual, trends and results. So we are really excited to learn more about what they have to say. Are you planning to go anywhere this weekend for,
for a little fun in the snow? Yeah, possibly. We'll see. I haven't quite decided, but I will let you know on Monday.
How's that? Snowboard. What is your hobby?
I do both, but lately skiing. So we'll see.
We have seen so much snowfall and avalanches, etc., that you have to be careful.
Yes, yes, you do. That doesn't bode well for tourism, but I think a lot more will. Thank you so much, Martina. And that is it for me here on the Living Markets, the Swiss Pulse. The big picture is up next, as we saw. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.
CNN Money Switzerland weather. We start with the webcam of the day. Here is an overview of the values recorded in the last hours. And now the map of Swiss warnings. Let's have a look to the forecast for this afternoon. And for tomorrow. Here is an overview for the next days in German-speaking Switzerland. In western Switzerland. And south of the Alps. Thanks for following us.
Let's talk tech. Do you want to see the latest gadgets? Understand where robotics will take us next? Find out more about the pioneers and their latest research? Join us on Tech Talk, where we'll be meeting the people behind the big ideas here in Switzerland and around the world, and finding out what it means for businesses, consumers, and the planet.
Tech Talk with Anna Maria Montero on CNN Money Switzerland.
Money is more than just currency. It is the fuel for how we live our lives. It connects us. It drives us. It buys us things. But it is more than that. It is is who we are and what we want. Oh, money isn't everything, but it is everywhere, and so are we. We are younger, we are richer, and we are smarter. We are money. CNN Money.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see. Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
In our big picture tonight, we're taking you to where people go on vacation. Tomorrow, Switzerland Tourism will present its yearly results and trends. We can already reveal that the National Marketing and Sales Organization expects a growth of between 4 to 5% for the current winter season compared to the last. That's based on the season so far. So, does this mean the tough times for Swiss tourism are over? Well, Yong Chen, assistant professor at the Ecole hôtelière in Lausanne, tells us if snow-enthusiastic Chinese tourists could brighten up the outlook.
We know Switzerland is very famous for skiing and many other activities. So therefore, when Chinese travelers come to a particular destination, they just want to experience something which is specific to that country. So I think Switzerland might be one of the top destinations in the future for Chinese sports travelers, especially snow sports activities.
And coming up in our Newsmaker Hour, he calls himself Russian President Putin's #1 enemy because of the Magnitsky Act that he pushed through the US Congress in the name of his late Russian lawyer. His pursuit of oligarchs involves an investigation into alleged money laundering in Switzerland, which has gone on for years now. But now, in an interview with CNNMoney Switzerland, Bill Browder claims that the Swiss investigation was corrupted. He's pointing his finger in the direction of Russia.
This was the Swiss authorities who discovered this collusion. Now we want to get it fully fleshed out and figure out how it can be properly dealt with going forward so that the Russians, that Putin isn't able to shush up a major investigation into his money laundering in Switzerland.
A very good evening to you. You're watching The Big Picture. I'm Martina Forst. It's great to have you here. Let's take a look now at the top stories making news here in Switzerland and around the world. Mining group and commodity trader Glencore is showing renewed strength, announcing its strongest ever full-year performance on Wednesday. Rising commodity prices have helped drive the company's comeback, with gains in copper, coal and cobalt over the past 12 months. Speaking after the release of its annual results, Glencore CEO Ivan Glasenberg said booming cash flows mean shareholders will be paid $2.9 billion in dividends. German car maker Volkswagen agreed to boost the salaries of more than 120,000 workers in Germany. They just won a 4.3% pay rise, not bad, from May onwards, and more time off as well. Volkswagen's new pay deal includes the option of 6 days additional annual leave for some groups of workers. The news comes days after the German automaker reported its best January sales record with a jump of 10%. Now, sterling fell against the dollar on Wednesday as the UK unemployment ticked up from 4.3% to 4.4%. It was the sharpest increase in nearly 5 years. However, in brighter news, coming out of the UK Office for National Statistics this Wednesday, average earnings beat forecasts, increasing by 2.5% compared to market expectations of 2.4% growth only. Although the Bank of England expects real wage growth in 2018, the office pointed out that people are still not seeing wages rise quick enough to keep up with the prices in the UK. Well, Switzerland was up a medal today in the Pyeongchang Games, with Mark Bischofberger taking second place in the men's ski cross competition behind Canadian Brady Lemon. The ski cross competition has 4 racers speeding side by side on a curvy course at speeds of up to 90 kilometers an hour. Bischofberger's silver medal win brings Switzerland medal count to about 8 now. So good times in Pyeongchang. Well, it's pretty much half-time now for Swiss winter tourism destinations, and the numbers look good for them. All across Switzerland, the ski resorts report an increase in guest numbers despite the heavy snowfall we have seen, avalanches and some blocked land routes into tourist destinations such as Zermatt. So does that mean all's good for the Swiss tourism after some bumpy years? We will be finding out all of that just after a short break. Stay tuned here on CNN Money Switzerland.
Excuse me, miss, you dropped this.
No, it's just a penny.
Just a penny? Just a penny? It all begins with the humble penny. Whether writing your first check or cashing big checks. To those at the top making their mark, closing deals round the clock. On Quest Means Business, we know every penny has power. And it's not how many you have, it's what you do with them that counts. That's the marvel of money. Quest Means Business. What a profitable hour!
News programs are usually full of short stories that barely go beneath the surface. We give you the big picture every weekday evening at 7 p.m. The big picture goes deeper, looking at an issue from different angles and bringing you the guests that take time to speak, explain and elaborate. Our viewers get a deeper understanding of the day's issues and the context that underlies them. The big picture, weekdays from 7 to 8 p.m.
It's high energy and fast-paced, so buckle up as Front Seat brings you the latest news and views from the automotive world. Car developments, industry news, interviews with successful drivers, the latest trends and next-level innovation here in Switzerland and around the world. On Front Seat, we'll keep you on the right road.
Front Seat with Hannah Wise on CNN Money Switzerland.
The Newsmaker is the ultimate talk show, where the biggest names in Switzerland tell you their most important stories. We delve into the economy, markets, politics, real estate, media, technology, and more to sharpen your mind and broaden your horizon. Every weekday from 8 to 9 p.m.
CNN Money Switzerland is designed to flow through information. Our network provides a unique take on live, worldwide financial news. We are not your common news outlet. Instead, we act as a global catalyst of interconnected information. Our live studio provides you with a detailed and sharp analysis, predicting what is yet to come. From the heart of Europe, watch CNN Money Switzerland.
Welcome back to the big picture. Have you been skiing or snowboarding this season? Well, I reckon there is a high possibility you have. And why wouldn't you have? Well, the conditions have been very good for weeks now. Unlike some previous winters, there certainly wasn't a lack of snow. Across the Alps, record amounts of it have been recorded. No wonder that after about 2 months of the winter season 2017-18, the numbers of the resorts look promising. That is according to the Association of Swiss Cable Car Operators. Well, despite some rough days in January, they have registered an average of 12.5% more guests than at the same time last year. All regions in Switzerland reported growing numbers of tourists from the season's start until the end of January. Let's take a look at the breakdown. Well, Graubünden, for example, there were 8.6% more guests in the season that we have just mentioned, and in the Bernese Oberland, 15.6% rise, while in the Valais, just about 2% more than in the same period last year. But not only the cable car operators are smiling, well, the hoteliers rub their hands in delight as well. According to the Swiss Hotel Association, 46% of them claim that this winter season is better than the previous one. For the association, a clear indicator that the hotel sector is on the recovery path. But is there really reason to be jolly and optimistic, or is it all just down to weather luck, and doesn't the fresh snow not just cover the old problems in the Swiss tourism industry? Because even though snow has been plentiful this winter, the impact of climate change poses a huge challenge. That's according to a recent report from Credit Suisse, which claimed that by 2035, only a third of Swiss alpine resorts will have enough snow in an average winter to offer skiing. Anna Maria Montero, my colleague, spoke with Sascha Juncker, who is a research economist at Credit Suisse. He helped to put together the study called "Will the Fresh Snow Save Winter Tourism?" So Anna Maria asked whether Switzerland really needs saving.
Well, it certainly does from our perspective. In the last 10 years, as you already mentioned, winter tourism hasn't performed very well due to climate change as well, but also during strong Swiss franc, a lot of European guests who didn't return to Switzerland to spend their ski holidays.
But actually, you also say that global spending by tourists has actually tripled, right? That in 2015 it was around 1.4 trillion, which is a big number. I think you would agree. How much of that pot is going to Switzerland?
Well, right now not a lot, I must say. Because of this idiosyncratic shock that happened in Switzerland on the currency side, so the Swiss franc that appreciated strongly against the euro in the past years. And of course, this megatrend holds true for the world or for the global environment, but Switzerland hasn't really seen a big share of this until now. Let's just think about the past 10 years where there was a huge decline in skiers, in overnight stays in the hotels, especially in the alpine areas. And right now, the business situation in most hotels, and especially in the mountain railways, cannot be described as good, even though there is the trend reversing right now to the positive. Mm-hmm. So I guess we're on the right track, but there is a long way to healing for tourism in the alpine regions. There is certainly the baby boomer generation that is very much attracted to winter tourism, who grew up also skiing or snowboarding. These baby boomers, they in 10 to 20 years, they won't be skiing anymore as they retire and get too old to do these kind of sports. And the younger generations, that's actually the big question. Are they going to replace those skiers and snowboarders in the future? And I think right now no one has an answer for that.
However, this season, everything seems to be on track. Given the growth numbers for this winter, looks good, but winter tourism is a tough sector. So let's take a look at some of the biggest challenges and talk to someone who is an expert in the area of financing for tourism infrastructure. Christian LAESSER is Adjunct Professor of Tourism and Service Management at the University of St. Gallen and joins us now. So, Professor LAESSER, how sunny, how bright is the outlook for the Swiss winter tourism destinations here?
Well, we have to be aware we crawl out of a very deep valley of tears. And even though the numbers for this season look promising, we're still way below the 5-year average. So there's a long way to go to be back on track.
And why is that? What is the main reason?
Well, we had, we had the impact of the stopping of the pegging of the Swiss franc to the euro. So the currency was an issue. It was also, we were too expensive, or have been too expensive for many years. However, now the euro develops in a promising way, at least hopefully on the long term. We have become more productive. Many cable car companies and also hotels have a better grip on their costs. And then we have the neighboring countries who obviously were very courageous, increasing prices. So, as a matter of fact, we are close to equality now in terms of consumer prices for tourists, which puts us back on the map.
So Switzerland is gathering steam, gathering pace, but still the competition with Austria and Germany and France is there. How can Switzerland gain a competitive advantage?
That's going to be really difficult because winter sports is essentially a commodity. It's a commodity, it's replaceable, it doesn't really matter where you do it, and moreover, the situation is serious in such a way that we are confronted with shrinking markets, declining demand, because essentially the baby boomers who fueled and propelled the development of ski areas in the past, they are going into retirement, broken bones and stuff like that. So they are not on the slopes anymore. The young generation has other interests, and we cannot internationalize this business enough to sort of replace the loss of skiers from local, from regional, from the region around here with international tourists. So essentially we have to put ourselves into the situation of having to deal with decline, with shrinking markets, and that poses a number of challenges to all the companies in the field.
You mentioned the younger generation. What is the problem there? Do they just prefer exotic destinations in winter, or do they just not have the time or the money to spend their, holidays and weekends in the snow?
It's more that they have many more options than the generation before them. Travel is very often also habitual. The baby boomers are still on the slope because they've been on the slopes during all their life. The younger generations, they have had more options right from the beginning. So for them, the role of winter sports is not as central as it was for the previous generations. And to bring them back onto the slopes in a way as their parents were on the slopes, that's, I would say, almost mission impossible.
So are they still learning to ski, or do they just prefer other hobbies nowadays, playing with their mobile phones?
They might, that would be a bit too bad if they would only end up with the mobile phones. But put it this way, they might ski because of other reasons, just because of the fun. Don't need to be as expert skier as maybe the parents want. And as I said, if you have multiple options, you sort of nip a little bit of that, you nip a little bit of that, and ski is nip a little bit, among other things. And therefore, as we do not have more time for leisure than in the past, and you have more options, then the time spent with one activity is automatically
So
less
what is
than before.
your piece of advice for the Swiss ski resorts? We have just seen on the graphics, for example, in the Valais, you know, very slow growth. I'm thinking of, you know, towns like Gromontana. They've had financial issues as well. What to do in those conditions?
Essentially, it's all about having cost under control without really hampering the value for the tourists. So if you management in this field has really become an art in such a way that, as I said, you have to save costs and make sure that the customer doesn't feel it. You know, you might sometimes it's just little things. You know, do not open one of the slopes. You know, you save a lot of diesel, you save a lot of water because you don't have to snow groom those slopes and things like this. And just by that, learn over time how to be more productive. And this is the only thing which will, on the long run, probably save us.
Let's talk a little bit about the price models and new initiatives. For example, SmartValor has kicked off a new strategy, which is, you know, a season's ticket for like 222 Swiss francs or 10 Swiss francs a day, tickets in Andermatt, Sedrun. Do you think these would be successful, such strategies?
I have my serious doubts, and
why?
Mainly because markets are essentially shrinking, so you sort of buy yourself market share. You sort of buy yourself market share.
Their own grave, basically, because of the budget.
Especially when you are at the end of the valley, like SmartValor, you know, and you have many ski fields in front of you. You know, they just have to do the same thing, and then your skiers are going to be gone. So I think this is not really a sustainable way. I would assume, though, to give credit give credit to the people or to the companies who do that. There might be a little bit of a market expansion because people might then go more often, possibly, or you might actually even attract people who stopped winter sports altogether before. However, I do not think, and I'm really curious about the numbers when we get the numbers, but I do not assume that the lack of income from such a pricing measure will be compensated by, on the long term, by a larger number of skiers, so that actually that you can break even.
So your outlook is very gloomy for these winter resorts. Should they just maybe, you know, cash in on summer vacation and build their strategies and campaigns around summer holidays?
I would actually. Golfing, tourism. You can always do that. You can always do that. I think one other approach would just basically be to not just think that winter sport is just a pricing issue. You know, if you ask yourself, what customer value do we want to create? You know, in this country, for example, we have 1 million or more expats living here. Most of them probably don't ski. So the simple question could be, how can we get those expats on the slope? They have different issues, maybe security, safety things, you know. So you have to address those issues. Everyone will say, yeah, you're just going to play in the niche all the time. But to be honest, first of all, companies learn a lot when playing the niche, and maybe you tap into a group of customers who have a willingness to pay, who are beyond the price which you actually ask at the moment. I think this is the way the business has to be designed in the future.
So what kind of, you know, packages should these tour operators build now to tap into the expat community, for example?
It's actually not even the tour operators who have to do this, but the ski field operators themselves go to HR departments of companies, for example. But also in terms of internationalizing demand, sort of look for new markets. You know, everyone is talking about China or India or whatever. However, we have to be aware that in many parts of the world, new ski fields are being developed. I mean, go to the Caucasus, go to Bulgaria, Romania, for example, even go to China. You know, they are developing. So the supply is also increasing with the demand, and it remains to be seen. Do we create overcapacity, or are we going to have actually maybe a little bit of a capacity crunch because demand overall on the global scale will be larger than the supply we have?
So do the tourists actually go to these destinations to spend their holidays?
Well, I know that the British people going to Bulgaria. It's also a real estate type of business. In the Caucasus, you have also the Russians. And so you have flows. Which at least in Europe we are not aware of. aware of, because we still have to be. The fact is that winter sports is still a regional or local business. It's only a small share of people actually sit in a plane for a long flight, except maybe in some exceptions, like we know that they are shuttling people essentially from New York to Vail, for example, in North America. But this is rather the exception to the rule than the rule. So are countries like Bulgaria, for example, or even Iran, where I have a lot of Swiss friends going to Iran to go skiing, even in the north, do they pose a real threat? And how could Switzerland compete with those? Because they must be cheaper destinations than being here at home. It would rather be smart not to compete actually, but to work together. So, for example, especially with Iran, with Tizin, I know that they, for example, work together with LAESSER in Switzerland, and we have had a group of Iran people in LAESSER. So those are the grooming sort of the grooming ski fields. Possibly also in China, in all those new ski fields which are being developed. They ski there, and then you tell them, okay, now you've done your own stuff. Now do the real thing. Come and try some of the best ski fields in the world in Switzerland. And then the only challenge which remains is logistics, visa, maybe what are you going to bundle up? What are you going to put in a package? What are you not going to put in a package? And make it as convenient as possible for those people to travel here. You have mentioned China, and this is actually going to be the second part of our big picture tonight. How optimistic are you that Chinese travelers will, first of all, learn how to ski in Switzerland, and whether they will give the Swiss tourist resorts a boost or not? It's hard to say. I don't think that they will give a boost in a way that they can replace all the customers which we have been losing and which we are going to lose also in the future, because we don't have the air capacity. I mean, you need many A380s filled up with Chinese flying to Zurich just to replace some thousands of the Germans which come here by car. So the problem is that with those international markets, breaking local markets we will never be able to replace them, because it's just in terms of air capacity we do not have enough capacity. Thank you very much for your time, Professor LAESSER, and I do hope that you will be able to enjoy the abundant snow here in Switzerland as well. Thank you. Thanks, Martin. And coming up after a short break, despite the current masses of snow, the good conditions for the next winter season are all but guaranteed. Can the Chinese tourists help provide a welcome boost for struggling Swiss ski resorts? We'll have more on that with our guest Yong Chen from the Ecole hôtelière in Lausanne. Stay with us after the break.
CNN Money Switzerland Business Weather, starting with Europe. Next step, Africa and the Middle East. Southeast Asia. And now Australia and Oceania. Let's go to North America. We end our trip with South America. CNN Money Switzerland accompanies you all over the world.
We try to be global and we try to be smart. What I want to hear are authentic voices of people who are passionate or intelligent, and that's the consistency that we try to get at.
Fareed Zakaria GPS.
Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
What drives Swiss leaders? What is the secret to their success?
In the Newsmaker, we speak to successful CEOs, entrepreneurs, politicians, decision makers, opinion leaders, sports, and entertainment personalities. We find out what makes them tick in a special long-form interview that gets to the heart of who they are and where they are going. So pull up a chair and join us for the Newsmaker every weekday evening from 8 p.m. on CNN Money Switzerland.
Somebody to tell you their story, it's something I take really seriously, and it's not something you can just parachute in and ask somebody to open their heart to you. To peel away the layers to get to the heart of the person who you're telling a story about.
France will never give up against the terrorists.
And delve beneath the surface of what's happening. You can hear their story, and you're going to do their story justice.
Thank you.
You have to show yourself to them.
So right now they're hovering pretty low over this area that's extensively flooded.
CNN's the right place to tell their story.
Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
How do you turn your idea into a successful business in Switzerland? If you want to develop your business, have individual mentoring and coaching, optimize your business model, develop a marketing strategy, acquire new skills, learn how to network. Autrement dit, formation, business opportunities anywhere.
What drives the Swiss business world? What makes the economy tick? And how do companies react to the ever-changing challenges of the markets? We've got our finger on the Swiss pulse. Well, we'll bring you the ups and downs, bulls and bears of the world of business, always asking what it means for you. The Swiss Pulse, weekdays from 6 to 9 p.m.
CNN Money Switzerland brings you the content you need, whenever, wherever you need it. Get the latest Swiss business and financial information on TV, on our website, cnnmoney.ch, or on your favorite social media platform. The best Swiss business news whenever and wherever you need it. Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
On the big picture, we are taking to the ski and snowboarding slopes of Switzerland. Tomorrow, the winter tourism industry is going to get some good news. We can tell you already now that new figures from Switzerland Tourism will announce an upturn since last winter. An expected growth of 4 to 5% will be unveiled. Does that mean the often talked about crisis in winter tourism in Switzerland is over? And what do the Swiss winter tourism destinations need to do to attract more guests and to remain attractive, even if the conditions don't play in their favor? And how could new markets like China help to revitalize the traditional tourism sector? That's exactly what I asked Dr. Yong Chen earlier on Skype. He's an assistant professor for tourism economics at the Ecole hôtelière in Lausanne. Dr. Chen, you are originally from China. First of all, tell me, do you ski yourself?
Unfortunately, I don't ski right now, but I'm ready to ski in this coming winter season.
Let's first of all talk about the snow industry in China now. Chinese President Xi Jinping's plan is to bring some 300 million Chinese onto the skis and snowboards for the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics. Is this plan not a little bit too optimistic?
I don't think so. Given the Chinese population, which is really massive, I think this objective can be reached, especially if you look at here, there's a role that the government can play in promoting the industry. So I think that's really special and important for the Chinese tourism industry. If there's a policy from the top government, actually it's like a navigation for not only the industry, but also travelers to flock into that destination or to engage in that kind of travel activities. So I think that's really, really possible.
And the Chinese government has a lot of these policies for the sports sector. We also know that the Chinese government wants to actually have China as a world football superpower by 2050. So that looks like being on track as well. Now, I lived in China for 5 years and went to several ski resorts, including Nanshan, just north of Beijing, and also Yanboli and Changbaishan, for example. So it's incredible how interested and keen the Chinese are on the ski and snowboard industry. How do you see this whole development, and do you think that a lot of Chinese will continue coming to Switzerland to practice the sports?
Yes, I think so. I mean, sports travel is a specialized market, not for mass tourists, but for some small group of travelers who can afford to travel in Europe, like Switzerland, France. So for these people, the objective is not only for sightseeing, for instance, or shopping. They have an objective, which is participating into these kind of sports, especially when these sports are related to a country like Switzerland. We know Switzerland is very famous for skiing and many other activities. So therefore, when Chinese travelers come to a particular destination, they just want to experience something which is specific to that country. So I think Switzerland might be one of the top destinations in the future for Chinese sports travelers, especially snow sports activities.
China at the moment has some 700 ski facilities, indoors and outdoors as well, and counts some 4 million skiers and snowboarders, which is basically half of the Swiss population. What really attracts them to come to Switzerland? Is it just, the landscape and the Swiss brand?
I think there are many factors. The first factor is that Chinese people's income, the economic growth in China over the past 40 years has led to a middle class. So these people who are not only able to spend overseas, but also are able to participate in these kind of activities. So if we look at Chinese tourism or Chinese tourists 10 or 20 years ago, these people focus on shopping. But I think there will be a new social class in China. In the US, people have discussed aspirational class. So this social class is quite different from previous class, like leisure class. These people are really interested in spending money and time on sports, on reading, on a wide range of education activities. It's not only about shopping. So I think this new social class from China, from India, will be the driving force for sports tourism in Switzerland and also across Europe.
Now, how can the Swiss snow and ski and winter resorts better benefit from this massive boom in China? What can they do to lure more Chinese tourists to, do sports, say, in the Swiss Alps?
Yes, I think the first issue here is that I would say that there's just a small fraction of Chinese people who can afford overseas travel in Europe, in Switzerland, not only because the price level in Switzerland is so high, but also because there are just 5% of Chinese people who have a passport. So that's why for Swiss ski resorts, the first thing here to attract these people, wealthy people. But if you look at Chinese tourists, it's not a single group as mentioned in the media. It's like Chinese people behave in the same way. Actually, it's different because if you look at Chinese tourists, depending on where they're from, if these people are from northern China, they have a good knowledge about skiing. But for people who are from southern China or eastern China, these people basically have little knowledge about skiing. So for Swiss industry, the key issue is that how to make sure Chinese tourists can get a better idea or some knowledge about skiing. And that's not a problem for Swiss people because that's part of Swiss people's life. But for a majority of Chinese, it's a problem. So educating people about the knowledge, tradition, and the culture of skiing activities in Switzerland might be a first step for the industry.
And the responsibility also lays with the Swiss, winter resorts. For example, last year, the town of St. Moritz held, for example, the Ski World Championships and teamed up with the Chinese state broadcaster, my former employer CCTV, to launch a campaign and to cover this huge competition. What should Swiss resorts do more in order, to launch communication strategies and lure more Chinese tourists to hit the slopes here?
Yes, so for snow sports, we know that from the demand point of view, there's seasonality, meaning that there's just a particular time period when the ski resorts can attract tourists, and it depends much on the weather for the next year. So for attracting Chinese travelers, especially when there's no many opportunities for skiing activities, I think the resorts should be able to develop a combination of different types of travel activities, not only skiing activities, but also hiking, for instance, in spring or summer. So to combine all these activities in a package, I think that would be more appealing to Chinese travelers. As mentioned earlier, a majority of Chinese travelers who are from southern China don't understand much about skiing activities, but they really enjoy the landscape of Switzerland, and I think that's a great opportunity for the ski resorts operators to develop a package or experience that combines not only ski activities but also other services like hotels, food, traditions, and other types of activities.
If we talk more about these packages, what should they look like in specific? Not just the food and hotels, but probably also offering, instruction classes in Chinese language, the lift passes, and other features. What are some of the key, package ingredients that these resorts should offer to the Chinese clientele?
Yes, I think the first issue here is language. So language barrier is everywhere when people are traveling to a different destination, especially for Chinese travelers. The size of the market is huge. So if there is a language service for Chinese travelers, the instructions are in Chinese. Maybe they can find the Chinese translators at the resorts. I think it's a great help for Chinese travelers to engage in the skiing activities. On the other hand, it's about a payment, how to make sure that the Chinese travelers can have an experience of make transactions at the destination. For instance, if they go to a hotel or restaurant, if they can use their mobile phone to make a payment, I think it's really something that Chinese people really like, because that's what they make purchase, that's what they behave at home. So therefore they expect something similar at a remote destination.
That is one of the challenges, because a lot of hotels and other institutions here in Switzerland, they don't yet use WeChat Pay, for example, the way you do in China. And also China Union Pay, the credit card and payment network, is not available everywhere. But another challenge also is that the Chinese do not have enough holidays. We are now in the Chinese Lunar New Year holiday, and happy Chinese New Year to you as well. That is 1 week of the holidays in calendar year, and then the second week is usually the Golden Week holiday, the first week of October after the National Day. So the Chinese do not have enough holidays to come to Switzerland and really spend time here.
Yes, you are absolutely right. There are two constraints for traveling. Number one is money. Number two is time. National holidays are really critical for people to travel especially if we look at long-haul destinations for Chinese people in Europe. Switzerland in particular is a long-haul destination, meaning that when Chinese people make a decision to travel to Switzerland, they may stay in Switzerland or many other neighboring countries for more than 10 days, which requires a long holiday. So in China, there are a lot of debates regarding on the national public holiday policy. And I think it requires some reforms in China to give people more holiday and to make sure that people can take different holidays in different time periods. So therefore, people do not need to demand for some services at the same time in the same place. So I think it's really good for Chinese travelers traveling at home as well as abroad.
Before we go, Mr. Chen, a lot of Swiss winter resorts, they still struggle with finances. You know, they have debt piles, etc., such as Lauker Bad, for example. To which extent do you believe that the Chinese tourists could help the Swiss resorts, actually, you know, to overcome these challenges?
I think Chinese people are spending money in Switzerland. That's a reason Chinese people can help to boost the revenues and the profits for the ski resorts. But I think there's still a balance between local residents, local Swiss residents, and the tourists. And we know that ski resorts are having certain capacity, and especially skiing is part of Swiss people's lifestyle. So when there's a peak season, not only for travelers overseas, but also for Swiss people. So there's a balance which should be made in order to meet the demands, not only for travelers from other countries, but also for Swiss people as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen. And I do hope that you will get an opportunity to learn how to ski or snowboard sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks.
And it's time to roll out the red carpet for you. And the latest science fiction movie hitting theaters soon takes us somewhere we've never been before in a couple of ways. CNN's David Daniel gives us a preview.
It's something they termed the Shimmer. We've sent in drones and teams of people, but nothing comes back.
Natalie Portman explores a mysterious phenomenon in Annihilation, based on the novel by Jeff Vandermeer.
You need to know what's inside. So do I.
Inside is beauty, strangeness, and danger, courtesy of director and screenwriter Alex Garland.
And he created this really special character who's a soldier scientist, so she can, you know, uniquely go into this area with these other women and try and figure out what is going on, that some people are going in but not coming out.
I can't see anything. Yeah, neither can I.
What's going on? What happened? Shepard was just next to me and something took her. Shepard!
There were very physical days for all of us. We all had, you know, these very heavy packs and machine guns all the time together, and it was a very physical film.
So much of it was in real time, so Alex created the world around us. There wasn't much CGI or green screen whatsoever, and I was able to do my own stunts, so it was a pretty hands-on experience.
Jennifer Jason Leigh, Tuva Novotny, Tessa Thompson, and Gina Rodriguez fill out the team in a shot at bringing some gender balance to sci-fi.
Well, I think that we're so used to seeing a group of men going on a mission together. We don't even question why is it all men. And the fact that it seems unusual to see all women, hopefully this just normalizes it, because why not? If it's all men, it can also be all women.
It's not destroying. It's making something new.
In Hollywood, I'm David Daniel.
And let's now take a quick look at the world of sports with my colleague Ana Maria Montero, who caught up with Matt Layton, our sports correspondent, a little bit earlier.
There it is, Matt. Ring that bell again.
Yes. We have to make an announcement. From now on, silver is the new gold, because we're fed up of not being able to ring our bell. Silver because this morning, 27-year-old Mark Bischofberger from Switzerland took the silver medal in the ski cross. Say he's a pretty much full-time athlete this time of year, because his employer's given him a few months off. Really, really difficult competition, but he's done extremely well. So he's actually the main man today, but we're celebrating another medal. That's 8 medals so far. Last time they had 11 medals. Still time to do things, but we're going to have to see how that pans out in the next couple of days.
Now, ski cross, this is not the safest sport, from what I understand.
The challenge is, and we've looked at statistics from 2010, 2014 Olympic Games, and we even saw in the ski cross today, poor Canadians had a bit of a bad injury. We're looking at the statistics of how many injuries athletes competing in these games have, and the statistics are absolutely frightening. The formula is, if you go fast and you go high and you turn upside down, there's a big probability of hurting yourself. Snowboard slopestyle, over 35% of athletes hurt themselves. Snowboard cross, freestyle aerials, ski slopestyle and ski halfpipe, all over 30% possibility of hurting yourself. You then come down to bobsleigh and alpine skiing, about 20%, about 10% risk if you're curling. You might get tendinitis, you might get a bad back or something else. And then the lowest one, which is really a surprise to me, is the combined Nordic, which is where you go off the ski jump, but apparently most people tend to land it. So it's good for us sitting in our armchairs watching it, but quite frankly, having over 30% chance of hurting yourself is a bit too high for most of us.
Yes, it's definitely something I would think twice about, for sure. And speaking of medals, there is still hope for some more medals to reach that 11 overnight. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you the downhill this morning was very disappointed, and Switzerland didn't do anything. So let's not go on about that.
Okay. we'll just keep moving. Go ahead.
Super combined tomorrow. Wendy Holden as the world champion. Michelle Gizin, she's the vice world champion. Both did that a year ago now in St. Moritz. They're both going to be competing tomorrow, so that's very, very exciting. Lindsay Vonn and all the big names, unfortunately, are also going to be competing. Sophia Goggia, who won the gold medal this morning in the downhill, she's going to be there. But it is a huge possibility for Switzerland to take a 9th medal. And we don't forget about curling. Yesterday it was all doom and gloom, and Switzerland had to have a certain combination of results go in their favour. Well, potentially they have. Tomorrow, they have to play Great Britain in a shootout. The last time they played Great Britain was in the first round of this competition. They lost very, very closely. They beat them 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now, if they beat them tomorrow, then they go into semi-finals. So that's pretty good news. Apart from that, searching around, we don't have that much news to relay of a positive nature. The cross-country skiers didn't do much today. And everyone else is really giving it their all, but not quite getting on the medal table. So it's fingers crossed tomorrow for Gizin and Holden up.
That's right, fingers crossed. And on my end, I'm always happy to ring that bell. So I hope I get another opportunity tomorrow to do that. Thank you so much, Matt Layton, for that update.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let's turn to some other news now. And Eurostar's new high-speed service from London to Amsterdam is running behind schedule. 16 months to be exact. Well, the service was originally scheduled to launch in December 2016. But after a series of delays, the first customers will board on April the 4th now. Eurostar inaugurated the route Tuesday, giving a sneak peek to a special group of riders, including CNN's Anna Stewart. Take a listen.
For 2 decades, their trains have barreled under the English Channel, revolutionising travel between the UK and Europe. Since launching in the 90s, Eurostar says it's doubled the number of visitors travelling from London to Paris and Brussels. Now its outgoing CEO hopes a new service from London to Amsterdam and Rotterdam will deliver on a long-awaited promise.
We have so many customers saying, when are you going to Amsterdam? So that's it, we're starting.
With prices starting at $50 each way, Eurostar is pitching itself as an alternative to low-cost airlines like Ryanair and EasyJet. But it's going to take a lot longer. Flying takes around an hour and a half, whereas this will take 3 hours, 41 minutes. Of course, it goes straight to the city centre, though, and Eurostar says it'll save time and money on getting to the airport. Brexit has actually boosted Eurostar. It's not just the weak pound, but all the EU and UK officials shuttling between London and Brussels for talks.
And also London-Paris, because a lot of companies are thinking, oh, maybe we should establish a subsidiary or something, and let's do it now while we're part of the EU.
Crossing into the Netherlands wasn't easy for Eurostar. It required hundreds of millions of pounds in investment and years of negotiations with Dutch officials. It's taken much longer than planned, and some hurdles still remain.
The huge problem for Eurostar is that they are launching, effectively, a train that only goes in one direction.
The UK and the Netherlands have yet to come to an agreement on passport checks, and they're not expected to do so until the end of next year. So until then, you've got to get a separate train to Brussels, where you go through passport control, and then you can hop on the Eurostar back to London. So you can get from London to Amsterdam in time for lunch, but you'll be hard-pressed to make it back for dinner. Anna Stewart, CNN Money, Amsterdam.
And I'll be back with the Newsmaker in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned here on CNN Money Switzerland. See you soon.
CNN Money Switzerland Leisure Weather. We start with a webcam of the day. We continue with the Alps of western Switzerland. And the weather forecast for the next days. A glance now on the resorts of central and eastern Switzerland. And an overview of the weather conditions to come. Here is the snow report of the ski resorts in France. And the weather forecast for this region. And we end with the Austrian and Italian Alps. We wish you a pleasant stay in the mountains.
Money is more than just currency. It is the fuel for how we live our lives. It connects us. It drives us. It buys us things. But it is more than that. It is who we are and what we want. Oh, Money isn't everything, but it is everywhere, and so are we. We are younger, we are richer, and we are smarter. We are money. CNN Money.
The Newsmaker is the ultimate talk show where the biggest names in Switzerland tell you their most important stories. We delve into the economy, markets, politics, real estate, media, technology, and more to sharpen your mind and broaden your horizon every weekday from 8 to 9 p.m.
CNN Money Switzerland brings you the content you need, whenever, wherever you need it. On our website, cnnmoney.ch, or on your favorite social media platform. Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
And seeing Shanghai the old-fashioned way. CNN Business Traveler in China. By the end of the next decade, the largest aviation market in the world. Are you ready for that? Businesses are spreading their wings. China Eastern, keeping the Chinese skies safe. New ways to earn miles. Are you still a mileage geek? Yes, always. And bridging culture gaps. Don't ask. On the next CNN Business Traveler.
CNNMoney Switzerland is designed to flow through information. Our network provides a unique take on live, worldwide financial news. We are not your common news outlet. Instead, we act as a global catalyst of interconnected information. Our live studio provides you with a detailed and sharp analysis, predicting what is yet to come. From the heart of Europe, watch CNNMoney Switzerland.
He calls himself Russian President Putin's #1 enemy because of the Magnitsky Act that he pushed through the US Congress in the name of his late Russian lawyer. His pursuit of oligarchs involves an investigation into alleged money laundering in Switzerland, which has gone on for years now. But now, in an interview with CNNMoney Switzerland, Bill Browder claims that the Swiss investigation was corrupted. He's pointing his finger in the direction of Russia.
This was the Swiss authorities who discovered this collusion. Now we want to get it fully fleshed out and figure out how it can be properly dealt with going forward, so that the Russians, that Putin isn't able to shush up a major investigation into his money laundering in Switzerland.
And setting rules for blockchain for the very first time. Swiss regulator FINMA has published guidelines for organizers of initial coin offerings, or ICOs. This is good news for blockchain technology and its long-term sustainability and success. But is FINMA really doing enough to quash worries and the potential risks to investors? Good evening, I'm Martina Fuchs and you are watching The Newsmaker. Let's take a look now at some of the top stories making news here in Switzerland and around the world. Mining group and commodity trader Glencore is showing renewed strength, announcing its strongest ever full-year performance on Wednesday. Rising commodity prices have helped drive the company's comeback, with the gains in copper, coal and cobalt over the past 12 months. Speaking after the release of the company's annual results, Glencore CEO Ivan Glasenberg said booming cash flows mean shareholders will be paid $2.9 billion in dividends. 120,000 German workers just won a 4.3% pay rise and more time off. Volkswagen's new pay deal includes the option of 6 days additional annual leave for some groups of workers. The news comes days after the German automaker reported its best January sales record with a jump of 10%. The sterling fell against the dollar on Wednesday as the UK unemployment ticked up from 4.3% to 4.4%, the sharpest increase in nearly 5 years. However, in brighter news coming out of the UK Office for National Statistics on Wednesday, average earnings beat forecast, increasing by 2.5% compared to an expectation of 2.4% growth. Although the Bank of England expects real wage growth in 2018, the ONS pointed out that people are still not seeing wages rise quick enough to keep up with prices in the UK. Well, Switzerland was up a medal today in the Pyeongchang Games, with Mark Bischofberger taking second place in the men's ski cross competition behind Canadian Brady Lemon. The ski cross competition has 4 racers speeding side by side on a curvy course at speeds of up to 90 kilometers an hour. Bischofberger's silver medal win brings Switzerland's medal count to 8. After the break, we speak to Bill Browder, formerly the biggest foreign investor in Russia. But after the death of his lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, he is fighting that the country's oligarchs in search of justice. However, he is now questioning the investigation within the Swiss justice system he initiated. Stay tuned for more just after a quick break.
Apparently, this person met with Natalia Veselnitskaya on his own initiative against the will of the authorities in Switzerland on a private trip to Moscow in which some of his expenses were paid for by the Russians, which puts the whole question of whether whether there was a mole inside of this investigation and whether this whole case has been compromised by the Russians corrupting somebody inside the system.
Let's talk tech. Do you want to see the latest gadgets? Understand where robotics will take us next? Find out more about the pioneers and their latest research? Join us on Tech Talk, where we'll be meeting the people behind the big ideas here in Switzerland and around the world, and finding out what it means for businesses, consumers, and the planet.
Tech Talk with Anna Maria Montero on CNN Money Switzerland.
How do you turn your idea into a successful business in Switzerland? If you want to develop your business, have individual mentoring and coaching, optimize your business model, develop a marketing strategy, acquire new skills, learn how to network. Autrement dit, formation, business opportunities anywhere.
Excuse me, miss, you dropped this.
No, it's just a penny.
Just a penny? Just a penny? It all begins with the humble penny. Whether writing your first check or cashing big checks. To those at the top making their mark, closing deals round the clock. On Quest Means Business, we know every penny has power. And it's not how many you have. It's what you do with them that counts. That's the marvel of money. Quest Means Business. What a profitable hour!
Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
I've spent all of my career in the field, and I think that informs who I want to talk to, but more importantly, who wants to and who accepts to talk to me. And I hope that what I bring to the table is a rigorous search for the truth and a rigorous determination and an effort to hold power accountable.
Amanpour.
The Swiss Pulse delivers you the most important global and Swiss business and financial news, connecting Switzerland to the world. Tune in every weekday from 6 p.m. or find us on the go on our website or social media platforms.
For somebody to tell you their story, it's...
And before we bring you the Newsmaker, let's first of all get you up to date with sports and our very own sports correspondent, Matt Layton.
There it is, Matt. Ring that bell again.
Yes. We have to make an announcement. From now on, silver is the new gold, because we're fed up of not being able to ring our bell. Silver because this morning, 27-year-old Mark Bischofberger from Switzerland took the silver medal in the ski cross. Say he's pretty much full-time athlete this time of year, because his employer's given him a few months off. Really, really difficult competition, but he's done extremely well. So he's actually the main man today, but we're celebrating another medal. That's 8 medals so far. Last time they had 11 medals. Still time to do things, but we're going to have to see how that pans out in the next couple of days.
Now, ski cross, this is not the safest sport, from what I understand.
The challenge is, and we've looked at statistics from 2010, 2014 Olympic Games, and we even saw in the ski cross today, poor Canadians had a bit of a bad injury. We're looking at the statistics of how many injuries athletes competing in these games have, and the statistics are absolutely frightening. The formula is, if you go fast and you go high and you turn upside down, there's a big probability of hurting yourself. Snowboard slopestyle, over 35% of athletes hurt themselves. Snowboard cross, freestyle aerials, ski slopestyle, and ski halfpipe, all over 30% possibility of hurting yourself. You then come down to bobsleigh and alpine skiing, about 20%, about 10% risk if you're curling. You might get tendinitis, you might get a bad back or something else. And then the lowest one, which is really a surprise to me, is the combined Nordic, which is where you go off the ski jump, but apparently most people tend to land it. So it's good for us sitting in our armchairs watching it, but quite frankly, having over 30% chance of hurting yourself is a bit too high for most of us.
Yes, it's definitely something I would think twice about, for sure. And speaking of medals, there is still hope for some more medals to reach that 11 overnight. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you the downhill this morning was very disappointed, and Switzerland didn't do anything. So let's not go on about that.
Okay. We'll just keep moving. Go ahead.
Super combined tomorrow. Wendy Holden as the world champion. Michelle Gizin, she's the vice world champion. Both did that a year ago now in St. Moritz. They're both going to be competing tomorrow, so that's very, very exciting. Lindsay Vonn and all the big names, unfortunately, are also going to be competing. Sophia Goggia, who won the gold medal this morning in the downhill, she's going to be there. But it is a huge possibility for Switzerland to take a 9th medal. And we don't forget about curling. Yesterday it was all doom and gloom, and Switzerland had to have a certain combination of results go in their favour. Well, potentially they have. Tomorrow, they have to play Great Britain in a shootout. The last time they played Great Britain was in the first round of this competition. They lost very, very closely. They beat them 3 or 4 weeks ago. Now, if they beat them tomorrow, then they go in the semi-finals. So that's pretty good news. Apart from that, searching around, we don't have that much news to relay of a positive nature. The cross-country skiers didn't do much today. And everyone else is really giving it their all, but not quite getting on the medal table. So it's fingers crossed tomorrow for Gizin and Holden up.
That's right, fingers crossed. And on my end, I'm always happy to ring that bell. So I hope I get another opportunity tomorrow to do that. Thank you so much, Matt Layton, for that update.
Thank you. Thank you.
CNN Money Switzerland Business Weather, starting with Europe. Next step, Africa and the Middle East. Southeast Asia. And now Australia and Oceania. Let's go to North America. We end our trip with South America. CNN Money Switzerland accompanies you all over the world.
After the fall of communism, he became Russia's biggest foreign investor. But last December, he was sentenced in absentia to 9 years of jail. The Moscow court found him guilty of deliberate bankruptcy and tax evasion. For Browder, it's all politically motivated. Following the death of his lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, in 2009, that he claims was murder. Bill Browder has led a fight for justice started by Magnitsky against impunity by Russian oligarchs. He lobbied US Congress for the Magnitsky Act to be passed, sanctioning Russian billionaires responsible for criminal acts and human rights abuses. Browder also pushed for an investigation by the Federal Prosecutor's Office into Russia's allegedly biggest tax fraud. Millions of Swiss francs in assets have been frozen in Switzerland since the investigation started in 2011. But this week, Browder told CNNMoney Switzerland that he asked for the recursion of the lead prosecutor. He says the reason he acted was because of unauthorized visits to Moscow by a Swiss agent involved in a probe in Switzerland. In this interview, Bill Browder begins by telling how he was first drawn to Russia.
I moved to Russia in 1996 to set up an investment fund called the Hermitage Fund, which was designed to invest in the newly privatized, publicly traded shares of Russian companies. And I discovered that the companies that I was investing in were effectively being robbed blind by the oligarchs, the people who were the majority shareholders of these companies. And so as both a survival strategy and a investment strategy, I decided that the best way to deal with the situation would be to research how these people went about doing the corruption, how they stole money, and then to take that research and share it with the international media, with the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, et cetera. And as a part of this process, we ended up exposing a lot of malfeasance in Russian companies. It had a very positive impact on the share price of the companies because when the stealing was exposed, the people who were doing the stealing didn't feel so comfortable anymore, and they stopped. And so it was a very good business strategy. It was also very good for the Russian business community because we were going after the biggest, most important companies in Russia and exposing them for bad behavior. And it wasn't just, we weren't the only investors, there were many other investors. And for a period of time, for about 4 years, it was even supported by the Russian government because, strangely at the time, Putin, who had just come to power, was basically fighting with the same guys that we were fighting with. And so there's an expression, your enemy's enemy is your friend. And so even though I've never met Vladimir Putin, for 4 years from when we started this process, from about 1999 to 2003, Putin was on our side.
You have never met Vladimir Putin. How close did you get to him?
Well, I didn't get anywhere near him. However, because so the oligarchs were stealing power from him at the same time as they were stealing money from us. And so we had this alignment of interests. And so every time I would publicize one of the scandals of the oligarchs, because they were his enemies, he would assign some member of his government to do something. And so I met all of the rest of the Russian government. I just never met Vladimir Putin.
Let's rewind a little bit. Your grandfather, he was the Secretary General of the Communist Party of America. Your father was born in Russia. After the fall of the Soviet Union, how was it to do business for you in Russia in the 1990s?
Well, it's interesting you pointed out my family background. So first of all, the reason I got to Russia was a strange rebellion from my family. As you mentioned, my grandfather was the biggest communist in America. And when I was going through my high school rebellion, I decided I was going to become a capitalist. And when the Berlin Wall came down, I said, if my grandfather was the biggest communist in America, I'm going to try to become the biggest capitalist in Russia. And so I went out there. It was truly the Wild West at the time, at the beginning of the privatization program. There was chaos, there was no rules, there was no laws, there was no enforcement. And so it really was a kind of sort of gold rush type of thing where nobody had any more experience than I did, but there was nobody, and that meant is that nobody had any experience at all. And so it was all building from the ground up, trying to build a capitalist economy.
You also published a book, Red Notice. It's a New York Times bestseller. And about working in Russia there, you wrote, and I quote, "It was as adventurous and occasionally dangerous as it was profitable." So who were you doing business with at that time?
Well, my business was a very narrow business, actually. So what I would do is I would look out at the stock market, and I would say, oh, here's an oil company that's trading on the stock market, and what is the price per barrel of oil reserves of this Russian oil company? And I do the calculation, and then I would say, and here's a company that does the same thing in the United Kingdom or in Norway or in America. What's the price of that oil company per barrel of reserves? And what I discovered was that the Russian companies were trading at a 99.7% discount to the value of the same companies in the West. And the reason for that discount was a very obvious reason for the discount, which was that everybody assumed that they were going to take it all away from you, that the government was going to renationalize everything. And so it was effectively venture capital and the venture capital was about political risk as opposed to technology risk. And the returns were similar to venture capital. You could either lose all your money because they would take it all away from you, or you could make 10, 20, 30 times your money if they don't take it away from you.
Before going to Russia, you were working for Salomon Brothers in London. How did you perceive Russia back then, you know, in the 1980s and 90s?
Well, back then, this was at the end of the Cold War. The Cold War effectively, or I should say the Soviet Union dissipated or disintegrated in 1991. And so, but everybody had the psychology that this was still the Cold War. And so I couldn't convince anybody to do anything in Russia for a very long time, including inside Salomon Brothers, where the economics and the numbers were so compelling. There's nothing, the investment opportunity could never have been more compelling than it was at that one moment in time. But it was terrible trying to convince people to invest there because of this prejudice about the Soviet Union.
So why did you decide to set up Hermitage Capital Management in Russia?
Well, I decided to do it partially for family reasons because of this rebellion from my grandfather. I also did it for economic reasons because I said to myself, look at the numbers. If they don't take it away from you, if this country just goes from horrible to bad, it doesn't even have to get great or good, just horrible to bad, you could make many, many multiples of your money there.
After working in Russia for several years, you were then expelled in 2005 without any warning, and your lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, had uncovered the largest tax refund fraud in Russian history after that, and suffered torture and medical neglect, which resulted in his death in 2009. What happened exactly that led to his death?
So it was a very ugly process of disintegration. So as I mentioned, my business strategy was to identify, research, and expose corruption in these Russian companies. And I did that, and for a certain period of time, that was accepted. And it was accepted because Putin was fighting with the same guys I was fighting with. But at one point in time, and this was in late 2003, he decided he was going to try to win his war with the oligarchs. In order to do that, he arrested the richest oligarch in the country, a man named Michael Khodorkovsky. He was the owner of an oil company called Ecole. He arrested him, he put him on trial, and he allowed the television cameras to film the richest man in Russia sitting in a cage. And so imagine that you're the 17th richest man in Russia. You're on your yacht on the Mediterranean, and you go out to your living room and you flick on CNN, and there you see in front of you a guy far richer, far smarter, far more powerful than you sitting in a cage. What's your reaction going to be? You don't want to sit in that cage. And so one by one, the oligarchs went to Putin and said, what do we have to do to make sure we don't sit in a cage? And he said 50%. And from that moment, Putin became the richest man in the world. all of my campaigns to expose corruption were no longer exposing his enemies, but exposing his own personal financial interests. And after that, then my life deteriorated very terribly. In November 2005, I was expelled from the country and declared a threat to national security. 18 months later, my office in Moscow was raided by the police, by 25 police officers. They seized all of our documents. The documents were then used to steal our investment holding companies. And then those stolen investment holding companies were used to fraudulently apply for a $230 million tax refund, the largest tax refund in the history of Russia. It was approved in one day and paid out on a fraud. We hired a young lawyer named Sergei Magnitsky to investigate. Sergei discovered the whole fraud, exposed it, testified against the officials involved. He was subsequently arrested by the same officials who had raided our offices. He was put in pretrial detention. He was tortured viciously for 358 days, and he was killed on November 16th, 2009, at the age of 37, leaving a wife and 2 children.
How much do you know today about what has exactly led to his death? Has there been any thorough investigation about the causes?
Well, there has been a huge amount of evidence available about how he came to die. And we have the medical records from prison. We have records from the night that he was killed of people, guards, acknowledging they beat him with rubber batons. We have pictures, autopsy pictures. We have testimony from different people. And most importantly, Sergei Magnitsky, during his 358 days detention, wrote 450 complaints documenting who did what to him, where, how, when, and why. And as a result of all this information, we have the most granular, detailed human rights abuse case that's come out of Russia in the last 35 years. And because of that, we expected that we would get justice in Russia, but Russia has absolutely refused to give us any justice whatsoever.
Prior to his detention, how did he manage to gather so much information about the wealthy businessmen and the oligarchs in the Kremlin?
Well, so what Sergei did prior to being arrested was he went around to all the different offices of the tax authorities. He went to the different registries. He went to the courts. He went everywhere and got official original documents. And from that, we were able to piece together this $230 million tax rebate fraud. And Sergei also figured out that our case wasn't the only case, that there's multiple other cases. And he clearly stepped by doing so, he stepped on the toes of the most powerful people in Russia, including Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin was a recipient and a beneficiary of this $230 million fraud that Sergei Magnitsky uncovered and exposed.
Now, the Magnitsky Act was signed into law in 2012 by then President Obama. It imposed visa bans and froze the assets of Russian officials that were linked to the death of Mr. Magnitsky. How were you received in the US when you lobbied in Congress to pass the act?
Well, before we even tried to get the Magnitsky Act passed, we tried to get justice inside of Russia. And because of all this evidence, we figured there had to be justice. This was an extremely high-profile case. There was no mystery about what had happened. The evidence was overwhelming. But the Russian authorities completely and absolutely blocked any chance of justice. In fact, they gave promotions and state honors to some of the people who were most complicit. And in the grossest miscarriage of justice, they put Sergei Magnitsky on trial 3 years after they killed him in the first trial against a dead man in the history of Russia. And so it became clear that there was no possibility of getting justice inside of Russia. So we said, how do we get justice outside of Russia? And that's when I went to Washington. That's when I went to Congress. And I went to Congress and I shared this story with Senator Benjamin Cardin, a Democrat from Maryland, Senator John McCain, a Republican from Arizona. And I shared this story with them, and they were both equally shocked. And this was not a political issue at all. This was a human rights issue. And when I told them this terrible, horrific story, and I said, how about we ban the visas and freeze the assets of the people who killed Magnitsky and the people who do similar other horrific crimes? And they ran with this idea. And when you ask how is it received in Washington, the answer was that back then there was no Russian torture and murder lobby to support the Russians. Everybody was on our side. And so when it went for a vote, it was 92-4 in favor in the Senate, 89% in favor in the House of Representatives. And the only person who was actually against us at the time was President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry. And the reason that they were against us is that they were trying to reset relations with Russia. They wanted to effectively appease Vladimir Putin.
You were also sentenced to 9 years in prison by Russian authorities. How did this whole story impact you personally and your family?
Well, so Vladimir Putin expected that the Magnitsky Act would never pass. He thought, because he had been given reassurances by Obama that we're not going to let this thing go forward. And see, he was completely shocked, outraged, and infuriated that the Magnitsky Act passed in December of 2012. And so in July of 2013, Sergei Magnitsky was put on trial as a dead man, and I was put on trial as his co-defendant in retaliation for the Magnitsky Act passing in 2012. I was found guilty and sentenced to 9 years in prison. I have since been found guilty a second time in absentia again and sentenced to another 9 years in prison. So I've been sentenced to 18 years in Russian prison in absentia. Putin has instructed his law enforcement authorities to go after me, and they have applied to Interpol now 6 times for my arrest on an international red notice. Thankfully, Interpol has now reviewed the case thoroughly and rejected Russia's request, saying it's illegitimate and politically motivated. The Russian government has gone to the British government, I live in London, and asked for my extradition on multiple occasions. Thankfully, the British government has also studied this carefully and realized that this was hugely illegitimate and politically motivated, and have rejected outright the Russians' request. But what it means is that when I travel, I've got to be careful because there's a lot of governments that don't read the documents carefully, that just mechanically follow Russia's requests, and therefore and if I am arrested and I am sent back to Russia, I will be killed in prison the same way Sergei Magnitsky was.
So much for the moment regarding Browder's personal fight against Russian authorities. As you know, in Switzerland, the investigation is still ongoing. We'll be back with more of the interview where he speaks of his doubts in Swiss investigations into the Magnitsky case and why he is asking the head of the probe to be recused.
This was the Swiss authorities who discovered this collusion. Now we want to get it fully fleshed out and figure out how it can be properly dealt with going forward, so that the Russians, that Putin isn't able to shush up a major investigation into his money laundering in Switzerland.
CNN Money Switzerland business weather, starting with Europe. Next step, Africa and the Middle East. Southeast Asia. And now Australia and Oceania. Let's go to North America. We end our trip with South America. CNN Money Switzerland accompanies you all over the world.
Business is always changing. Keep up with CNN Money. Maggie Lake is live in the heart of the world's economic epicenter, New York City, tracking all the action of the stock exchanges and the big business stories from around the world. Get top analysis of market movement and a daily breakdown of financial headlines. CNN Money with Maggie Lake.
Spotlight, CNN Money Switzerland's program dedicated to lifestyle, celebrity, entertainment and culture. We bring you a snapshot of the latest trends in Switzerland and around the world, from Hollywood to design, big names and rising stars, to art collectors and architects. It's right here under the spotlight.
Spotlight with Martina Fuchs on CNN Money Switzerland. CNN Money Switzerland brings you the content you need, whenever you need it. Get the latest Swiss business and financial information on TV or on the go through our website, cnnmoney.ch, or through your favorite social media. The best Swiss business news, whenever and wherever you need it. Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
You make sure you're feeling good. We'll be focusing on all the tools available to us today to make sure we're physically and mentally healthy. From monitoring and avoiding disease to reactive and preventative healthcare. In particular, we'll be delving into the latest innovation coming out of Switzerland to ensure a long and healthy life.
Feeling Good with Amanda Kane on CNN Money Switzerland.
Since the founding of the Red Cross in 1863, the city of Geneva has a long tradition of hosting international organizations. In our program, International Geneva, we'll be exploring issues of international cooperation, humanitarian assistance and human rights, and talk to international players about the challenges and solutions to global problems.
International Geneva with Martina Fuchs on CNN Money Switzerland.
The Newsmaker is the ultimate talk show, where the biggest names in Switzerland tell you their most important stories. We delve into the economy, markets, politics, real estate, media, technology, and more to sharpen your mind and broaden your horizon. Every weekday from 8 to 9 p.m.
Welcome back to the Newsmaker. Tonight, Bill Browder tells us his truth on his campaign into the Magnitsky case. But that requires a bit of an explanation following the death in prison of his lawyer Sergei Magnitsky in 2009. Bill Browder has been asking justice for his colleague who had sought to expose corrupt Russian business leaders. Browder successfully lobbied US Congress for the 2012 passing of the Magnitsky Act, which imposes economic sanctions on Russian oligarchs. The act was more recently the focus of a meeting between President Donald Trump's son and a Russian lawyer during Trump's presidential campaign. The lawyer has stated that she met with Donald Trump Jr. to present evidence against Hillary Clinton and to lobby for the repeal of the Magnitsky Act. Meanwhile, in 2011, Bill Browder had initiated an investigation in Switzerland into funds he alleges were laundered here by Russian oligarchs. While 18 million Swiss francs in assets have been frozen, the Swiss investigation is still ongoing. But after recently learning that an agent involved in the probe was fired after an unauthorized visit to Moscow, Browder told CNN Money Switzerland that he is requesting the recusal of the probe's chief. Browder showed us the request he sent to the Federal Criminal Court. He explains to me earlier what led him to do so.
The reason that this case came up in Switzerland was that when we realized there was no justice in Russia, the other big thing we did, in addition to getting Magnitsky Acts passed, was to say who got the $230 million that Sergei Magnitsky was killed over. And we, a whistleblower came to us in 2010. His name was Alexander Parapolichny. And he said he was a member of the criminal enterprise that stole the $230 million he had fallen out with his co-conspirators, and he had all the documents of where the money went. And so he came to us and he said, here's some bank documents which show that some of the money went to the husband of the woman from the tax office who approved the tax refund in his accounts at Credit Suisse. And he gave us the Credit Suisse bank statements. And so we have these documents, and we filed them with the Swiss Attorney General, and the Swiss government froze the money. And the government has now had an ongoing case, I believe it was actually since 2011, in which now about $20 million has been frozen in Switzerland.
And who are these individuals exactly? What do you know about them?
Well, so far we know that there's basically three sets of individuals. There is the husband of the tax officer who approved the tax refund, whose name is Vladlen Stepanov. The second group of people that have about $7.5 million frozen is a guy named Denis Katsiv, whose money has also been frozen in the Netherlands and the United States. And they just paid a $6 million fine to the Department of Justice after a big money laundering case there. And then the third person is a man named Dmitry Kluyev. And so Dmitry Kluyev is the head of the Kluyev Organized Crime Group. The Kluyev Organized Crime Group was responsible for this whole thing. Kluyev and the Stepanovs are all on the U.S. Magnitsky sanctions list, and their money is frozen here in Switzerland. But the most strange part of the whole story is that the case has been going on now 7 years and is dragging suspiciously slowly.
So how confident are you in the system, and what action should Swiss authorities take?
Well, I was confident in the system theoretically all the way through, but some information has come to light which has given me great concern, which is that a senior member of the Swiss Federal Police involved in this case, who is also on secondment to the prosecutor's office, has recently been abruptly suspended and fired from his job, put under criminal investigation for inappropriate dealings with Russia. And apparently, this person met with Natalia Veselnitskaya on his own initiative against the will of the authorities in Switzerland on a private trip to Moscow in which some of his expenses were paid for by the Russians, which puts the whole question of whether whether there was a mole inside of this investigation and whether this whole case has been compromised by the Russians corrupting somebody inside the system.
Where will you take this case now, and what do you think will happen next?
Well, we have applied to the court to have the entire investigation team recused because we don't know who can be trusted and who can't. We've also applied to be added as an injured party to the criminal case against this individual, so that we can, because we are an injured party in this case, and it's our intent to make sure that whatever compromise has happened gets totally pushed aside, and that the Switzerland can do a proper investigation as we had intended for them to do from the very beginning.
What would this mean in terms of US, Russian and Swiss relations going forward?
Well, at this point, the Magnitsky case has probably become the single most important case in terms of exposing corruption of the Putin regime. And Putin is very, very firm on trying to crush the Magnitsky sanctions, get rid of these criminal investigations around the world. And so this is a highly political case because of Putin's own interests. And as a result, we need to be extra vigilant in the West, in Switzerland, in the United States, and other countries to make sure that there's no appeasement going on, there's no corruption going on, and that this is fully prosecuted right until the end.
Because your accusation basically means that there wasn't only collusion possible, maybe in the US, but also here in Switzerland.
Well, this was the Swiss authorities who discovered this collusion. Now we want to get it fully fleshed out and figure out how it can be properly dealt with going forward, so that the Russians, that Putin isn't able to shush up a major investigation into his money laundering in Switzerland.
So how much of that money from your case is actually here in Switzerland?
Well, we know for sure that $20 million from the crime, the $230 million that Sergei Magnitsky uncovered and exposed and was killed over, has come to Switzerland and is frozen in Switzerland. But beyond that, we believe that there's literally billions of dollars of corrupt money coming from Russian officials held in Swiss banks. And I think this is just the tip of an enormous iceberg. And there's a big responsibility for the Swiss authorities and the Swiss banks to find that money, freeze it, and seize it.
Now, the Mueller investigation in the US is continuing with the meddling in the 2016 US presidential election, and it has led to the indictment of like 13 Russians approximately. What further results are you expecting from this case?
What I can say is that Robert Mueller has has unlimited resources to investigate. He can do wiretaps, he can do subpoenas, he can charge witnesses and make witnesses become cooperating witnesses, and he has 20 highly capable U.S. attorneys under him and 200 FBI agents under them to do this investigation. I have full confidence that whatever has happened will be exposed, and we're all very impatient. But the wheels of justice move more slowly than our political aspirations that this thing gets resolved quickly.
Do you think we might see any more surprises when it comes to, the Mueller investigation following the money trail?
Well, every time he comes up with something, it's a surprise. And it's what's most interesting is that there are no leaks. Every time Mueller makes an announcement, there was never any hint that he was going to do it beforehand. And so I think you should assume that there'll be big surprises coming out. We just don't know what those surprises will be and when they'll happen.
So ever since the introduction of the Magnitsky Act, sanctions have been imposed on many Russian officials. What kind of impact did this have on Russia's status in the world and on Russian businesses overall?
Well, the most important effect that the Magnitsky Act has had is not who it's sanctioned so far. There's only 49 people sanctioned in the whole country. But the effect that it's had is it's created a climate of fear among human rights violators and corrupt officials in the Russian regime. Every single person who's committed a crime in Russia, in government, is in fear that their money will be frozen in the West. And they have an unwinnable situation because they can't keep their money in the West safely. And they can't keep their money in Russia safely because if they keep their money in Russia, it could easily be stolen from them. And so their entire methodology of kleptocracy, of stealing, has been put into question by the Magnitsky Act.
Last summer, you testified in front of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee on Russia's alleged meddling in the 2016 presidential elections. What exactly did you tell them?
Well, the main message that I told them was that the reason why Putin meddled was because he was afraid of the Magnitsky sanctions. The reason he is afraid of the Magnitsky sanctions is that he was one of the financial beneficiaries of the crime that Sergei Magnitsky exposed and therefore subject to the sanctions. And therefore, the entire operation that the Russians conducted was because of his own personal financial interests and all connected to the Magnitsky case. And so it finally gave clarity to everybody in America why there was meddling. Everyone knew that there was meddling. We know it even more now. But what I added to the whole political discussion is what the motivation was from Russia.
What do you know about the now infamous meeting between Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Natalia Veselnitskaya at the Trump Tower?
Well, so Putin hates the Magnitsky Act because he's worried about his own money. And so he was looking for an opportunity to have the Magnitsky Act repealed. And the way that they exercised that opportunity was when they saw that Donald Trump had been nominated as the Republican nominee, they sent in an emissary, an agent, who was a female lawyer named Natalia Veselnitskaya. And she went to that meeting, not with Donald Trump, but with Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort. And she sat down on June 9, 2016, and said to them, I want to have the Magnitsky Act repealed. And then we know that for sure. Nobody has said otherwise. What we don't know is what happened after she asked that. What did she offer and whether it was accepted.
Have you felt any pressure from the Trump administration because the act that you helped, introduce is now at the center of the investigation against the U.S. president?
Well, the Trump administration has been actually quite supportive. And I should separate Trump from his administration. Donald Trump tweets out crazy things, saying offensively supporting Vladimir Putin and so on. But his administration is full of highly capable, experienced government officials. You have the Defense Secretary, Mattis, who's fully cognizant of what the Russians are all about. The UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, gives absolutely tough speeches about Russia. Even Rex Tillerson, who is an oil man, is absolutely tough on Russia. And I should point out that when the Magnitsky Act listings, the actual names came up for review and more names in December, the Trump administration, those people I've just named for you, put on some very good high-value targets that we have been hoping for. So I don't think that we haven't seen any slippage from the Trump administration so far.
What is your ultimate goal, with your fight for more human rights in Russia and also with your former lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, and the act that followed? Well,
since Sergei Magnitsky was killed, he was killed for being my lawyer, and I take it very personally that he would still be alive today if he hadn't been working for me. And so my main objective since he was killed, and I made a vow to his memory, to his family, and to myself, that I was going to go and get justice for Sergei Magnitsky. And for the last 8 years, that's what I've been doing. And so I've got my primary goal of getting justice for him, and my secondary goal, which is to create a legacy for him, a legacy which can be used by all other victims of human rights abuse, which is in the form of a Magnitsky Act. And there are now 6 countries in the world that have a Magnitsky Act: the United States, Canada, Britain, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. And my goal is to have this be a piece of legislation which applies to bad people everywhere, named after Sergei Magnitsky, which is adopted by every civilized country in the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Browder.
Thank you.
That was Bill Browder's take on his long campaign against Russian authorities. Some of his claims cannot be verified. However, CNN Money Switzerland asked the Swiss Criminal Court to comment on Bill Browder's request for recusal of the chief investigator in the Magnitsky case. They said they do not give information on open cases. Meanwhile, the Swiss federal prosecutor responded to a request for information and described the probe as, quote, complex criminal proceedings. It confirmed that proceedings of the OAG are still ongoing. And earlier tonight on the living markets, the big topic was ICOs. Now, initial coin offerings have been booming, but there are concerns about the risk of fraud or money laundering. Last Friday, the FINMA, the supervisor of the Swiss financial market, released its guidelines. So is it still the wild, wild west? My colleague sat down earlier with Olga Feldmeier, CEO of SmartValor, a company based in Zug, which is in the ICOs business, and she gave my colleague Anna Maria Montero, I should say, her take.
Yes, this is, of course, the perception of people outside, that we're a huge bubble and it's all Wild West. If you're inside of that business,
so much more organized.
Things looks pretty much different. Okay. But anyway, it's not really regulation. I think it's more like guidelines, and the purpose of it is to provide at least some guidance for startups and for companies in this space. Right, and a lot of people expected more from this guideline. I think it's very good. It gives shape and basic guiding principles, right? It doesn't, give too much detail, but it just hints on certain things. And this is great. This is what we need. Principle-based regulation. This is a strong side of Swiss regulation, and this is great.
What is so great about it? I mean, what principle-based regulation?
That you know, you leave a space, right? You don't like go there and provide 100 rules for all the cases in advance. If this, then it should be like this. Because you see, the space is so new, right? We never had this before. How could you go over and write a very detailed prescription and regulation? That would kill the innovation in this space, right? And this is exactly the reason why we here in Switzerland, with FINMA as a regulator, have a very good chance to develop into global crypto hub. Because we have this principle-based approach, it enables breathing space, it enables innovation. And, you know, we will see where this goes.
Part of the reason for this kind of guideline being imposed is, of course, to protect investors from money laundering and to keep things as transparent as possible. Do you think it's going to be effective enough?
Well, you see, I think this guideline is now not deciding anything. You know, everything that is there was actually there anyway. Now it's just on paper, right? It means, you know, that FINMA is looking at those cases case-by-case basis, right? Because they're all very different, right? So this stays the same. It's great that they said, okay, there are those 3 types of tokens. And even, you know, some people say, oh, well, this is obvious. No, but this is great because up to date, no other country did this, you know, like even classifying like that, right? So this is great. And yeah, they're saying, well, with payment token, of course, you need to apply anti-money laundering rules and so on. And with utility tokens, there are other definitions. So this is nothing new, right? What is great also, you know, that they kind of like also hint on that how they apply this regulation and how they will deal with those cases. This is more forward-looking. So that means, you know, those ICOs that have been done in 2017, a lot of people are afraid, you know, that now they will start to dig into those ICOs and start to... Okay. So this is not the focus. The focus is the future. And actually, I think the most important part was not what is in the guidelines, but what is in announcement about the guidelines.
What do you mean?
In the announcement, there is a quote from Mark Branson, who is the head of FINMA, and he's saying something like, with our balanced approach, we enable innovative projects to run fundraising in a compliant way, right? And this statement, this is actually the biggest and the most important statements because it shows the way FINMA is going. It shows the way they want to enable innovation and good companies coming here.
And that's it for the Newsmaker tonight. I'll see you again on the Swiss polls tomorrow. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.
Welcome to the CNN Money Switzerland weekend weather, starting with Saturday. And here are the comfort indexes for the Swiss cities. Let's have a look for Saturday in Europe. And the comfort indexes for some cities. Let's go to Sunday in Switzerland. And here are the comfort indexes. And we end with Sunday in Europe. And discover the more attractive cities based on the weather.
News programmes are usually full of short stories that hardly go beneath the surface. We give you the big picture. Every weekday evening at 7 p.m, The Big Picture goes deeper, looking at an issue from different angles and bringing you the guests who take time to speak, explain and elaborate. Our viewers get a deeper understanding of the day's issues and the context that underlies them. The Big Picture, weekdays from 7 to 8 p.m.
Money is more than just currency. It is the fuel for how we live our lives. It connects us. It drives us. It buys us things. But it is more than that. It is who we are and what we want.
Oh,
Money isn't everything, but it is everywhere. And so are we. We are younger, we are richer, and we are smarter. We are money. CNN Money.
The Newsmaker is the ultimate talk show, where the biggest names in Switzerland tell you their most important stories. We delve into the economy, markets, politics, real estate, media, technology, and more to sharpen your mind and broaden your horizon. Every weekday from 8 to 9 p.m.
How do you turn your idea into a successful business in Switzerland? If you want to develop your business, have individual mentoring and coaching, optimize your business model, develop a marketing strategy, acquire new skills, learn how to network. Autrement dit, formation, business opportunities anywhere.
CNN Money Switzerland brings you the content you need, whenever you need it. Get the latest Swiss business and financial information on TV or on the go through our website, cnnmoney.ch, or through your favorite social media. The best Swiss business news, whenever and wherever you need it. Only from CNN Money Switzerland.
The Big Picture zooms in on the issues that matter to you and your wallet. Join us as we make sense of the world of business every weekday from 7 to 8 p.m.
Want a daily dose of Fareed and his team? Now you can get it with Fareed's Global Briefing, the newsletter that gives you the best insight and analysis on global affairs. Go to cnn.com/Fareed to sign up.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran.
We are in Jerusalem. Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see.
Observing countries on the move, still rooted in tradition.
It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, today on CNN.